So would you say then that like black people do poorly because they're too stupid? Like if they have so many advantages that they're still doing poorly in America, is it because they're too stupid to do well?
Well,
That's what the whole idea is.
So Sean does agree with that.
Saying it, but obviously,
I don't think that's the case.
Yeah, sure. I'll jump on.
A few moments later.
So where we at?
Oh, well, what he forgot to mention is that he's one of my best friends, and we hang out all the time. And you know, he's been getting closer and closer to me, and we've just been you know, real buddy lately. So I want to throw that out there.
Inseparable.
Oh, I remember what I was going to say was basically the idea that like if you think that any aspect of your if you think that it's like even just sad to give up anything about your culture that you care about, that's like a nationalistic. That makes you a nationalist. Is that what?
It's a common trope in nationalist thought, and specifically nationalist thought in reaction to industrialization in Europe too. If you go back to the 1700s and 1800s, that this kind of mass economic mobilization of all the resources destroys a kind of culture, and that in fact they would rather have this kind of earlier set of cultural norms instead of the economic development. I don't personally agree with that. I was just curious what you thought about it, because a lot of liberal thought kind of has a very negative reaction to that. I think it related to some way to something you said earlier, but at this point I don't remember.
I think that if we talk about like which way they would rather have it, then it's I mean the third option, obviously, like they would like the benefits of it and still keep the things about their culture they enjoy, right? Like they would probably prefer that if they have all the options on the table. But I mean that's obviously not the way things played out. So
next question.
Okay, yeah, all right. Oh God, wait till you guys. I'm not gonna play this on stream, but I just raided into I think Prime K's panel, and if you guys saw the panel.
Oh no! Oh no! Oh, that's not good. That is not good. He's gonna be upset. He is not gonna be happy about that one.
Oh my gosh, I like everything you say your community. Yeah. Let's talk. That's actually a really good sequitur, because I think it's interesting. Do you think, Miyo, that an environment where like it really feeds into the kind of like racial narratives about you constantly talk about how white people are white people are treated badly and stuff, like do you think that like this environment is like really going to make things better for Timmy?
Well, yeah, actually, and the reason why is because all of this stuff is happening, and it's this anti-white rhetoric is real, and like I said, it's taking place in the universities, as we talked about with that black professor who's openly advocating for white genocide now. It's happening in K through 12 education, where you're seeing books read that, like, you know, depict white people with devil horns and stuff like that, a wad of cash in their hand.
Teaching that book?
It's
and what's the context of the white devil horns?
Increasing number of schools are teaching that, and that's the point. And the fact is, this is a pervasive in our culture. It's all over the place. And this critical race theory stuff is more popular and more of a hot topic. And pushing back against it is more taboo than ever. And so it's like with all of this happening, I believe that the only answer left for white people is to reforge their own racial identity and say, no, we're not dealing with this, and we're pushing back against it before it's too late. I would rather there be a struggle, the cultural struggle in this country with that, than there be just a white genocide that happens in the future without any sort of a cultural struggle against it at all.
So you actually you just said you do want to reinforce these racial lines then?
Oh, no, I mean, it's that what I'm saying is I'm recognizing that these racial lines are being enforced. You're the one who's saying that being colorblind isn't good enough, that these racial lines have to be made explicit. It has to be essentialized. It has to be taught all throughout these places. And so, so recognizing it, I'm arguing for the same thing. Recognize it. I'm just advocating for white people, and you want to demonize white people, and that's the difference.
I'm sorry, but like me and Miyo just had this conversation the other night, and it seemed as though we agreed if we are colorblind, and there was some sort of systemic injustice against a certain race, we would have no clue. We wouldn't be able to see it because we are colorblind.
I completely agree
yes,
with that.
We
I do
agree
understand
with that. So
that.
we
And
don't
that's why-
want to be colorblind, but we still want to recognize systemic injustice at the same time.
I agree with all of that, and we should also recognize the historic achievements of white people, and that should be just as prevalent in the education systems. However, what we're seeing is not that. What we're seeing is one-sided anti-white rhetoric explicitly, and that's what I have a problem with.
Well, the problem is,
that's the thing. Race is real. It should be recognized, and then it's like the historical oppression that should be recognized, and the historical achievements, those should be recognized as well.
Okay.
And that's what we're missing.
Okay, so yeah, so you're saying because we recognize the bad things that happen when it comes to race, we should also recognize the good things when it comes to race, right? And I don't think that I agree with that in any way whatsoever. The only reason that we need to recognize race whatsoever is so that we can see when people are being discriminated against when it comes to race. But white people doing something good, they didn't do good because they're white. That, like, their white skin had absolutely nothing to do with it outside of the advantages that they got from their skin color being white. That's it. And so in other countries, we can look at like Africa and say that there are probably black people who get advantages from being black, and they probably get some sort of systemic advantage because of the color of their skin, just the same as it would be in any white country or any country where they are the majority. It's not different for white people. It's not an essentialized characteristic to where we are doing better because of the color of our skin.
And there it is, folks. We should recognize the evils
obvious.
of white people without recognizing any of the achievements, because that would be bad. And there it is.
No,
the one-sided
it's not that it would be bad. It's
Because
that it's pointless.
the achievements were not done along racial lines. The atrocities were.
Mm-hmm.
No, the achievements were along racial lines because it was Western
Only
Europeans
if they
built.
were. Only if they,
I thought it's you talk and then I talk.
Yeah, I said go ahead.
It's because the achievements of Western European descendant peoples who built Western civilization should be recognized along with the bad. And if you guys wanted to teach that, I would have much less of a problem with it, because you know what? It would be the history of civilization's creation, along with all the pitfalls and missteps along the way, and all the good things that have come from the people who built it, regardless of how they built it, or the causes of like whether it had to do with their race or not. It doesn't matter. It is a certain group of people that built civilization, and you should categorize these missteps and pitfalls and wrongdoings along the way as a part of the story of the building of civilization.
I'm sorry.
Rather than just evils that white people committed against others.
I don't want to miss this part. Can you just give me like a yes or no question, or a yes or a no answer? Did these people achieve those things because they are white?
I don't think that has anything to do
No,
with it.
I'm going to give a
even
hard
if it
yes to
doesn't,
that.
even if it
Just
doesn't,
sort of
I would like
Sean
an
believes
answer.
it was.
If regardless of whether or not you think it matters, I would like an answer. Do you think they achieved these things because of the color of their skin?
Because of the color of their skin, no.
Okay. All right.
I would say it played a factor because of the systems that were set up around them, but not because of anything inherent to like whiteness or skin color of whiteness anyway. But Sean disagrees, right? So do you want to elaborate on that, Sean?
I don't think he means the color of your skin.
No, I don't mean the color of your skin.
Well, you said race, right?
Yeah, I mean white in the sense of race, in the sense of having
Okay.
certain gene variants being more common in white populations that lead to things like higher intelligence, individualism, et cetera, that led to them being able to set up certain kinds of civilizations that did things that other groups either would never have done or would have taken
Kind of
much longer to
slavery.
do.
Yeah, I'm sorry. For me, like if I say color of skin, to me that's the same thing as race. I'm not a race realist. So
Right,
like,
but
for
what
me,
he
it's-
just
Sure, so like albino Africans to you are European, are white people.
well, it's not.
No,
I
because obviously no one means that.
I
That's
su-
silly.
yeah, I
might be
suppose
perceived
you're
right
right.
in
Like
some
it's not
contexts.
color of skin by itself, but yeah, you're right. Like
It's
I would look at
context.
like nose shape, hair color, or hair, like the way that their hair looks, or
Nose shape. Tom. Whoa, watch it.
well, I'm
buddy.
not looking at skull shape, buddy. That's one
Let's
place where we're
break
gonna
out the
differ.
calipers, Tom.
So when we say that race is like just based on like skin color, we're not literally talking about only skin color. We're talking about like there are some like phenotypic groupings that people make, and they make assumptions about people's race based on
that phenotype.
I mean, this is not a black box of history. We can look back at people like Blumenbach for an obvious example of one of the early anthropologists that created our modern racial theories. And it's true at the time, right? These are being based on baskets of phenotypes, like things about your lips, noses, skull, skin color, etc. But it was known the entire time. The reason why they were using that is as a proxy for their ancestors. Like this is just
it's right, and
a
it's
weird thing to say that it was literally just the phenotypes. Like it is an ancestral category.
Phenotypes come from genetics,
Darwin
man.
Called them subspecies. Like this is why there's a whole biological history of thought about like it was never. This is just not a thing that it wasn't about ancestry.
And phenotypes are a way that genes express themselves. That's what phenotype is. It's a way that genetics express themselves. And so obviously people with vastly different phenotypes from each other have different genetics. And it's not just genetics which lead to physical characteristics. They lead to mental characteristics as well. And that's
but you don't have evidence of that, except for the just so stories about
the evidence is that some people built Western civilization and some people built mud houses and TV.
Well, some people
no.
Some
I mean,
people also the
evidence
use the labor of another group of people to build a lot of that civilization, right?
Yeah, but
the evidence for something like that, there are genes that impact things like mental ability that are more common in one group or the other. These are not just so stories. These are things like if you look at the genes that predict higher IQ within each racial group, right? Those genes are more frequent in, say, whites and Asians than Africans. If you look at marginal increases in genetic ancestry, it is true that marginal increases in European ancestry predict higher IQ. Marginal increases in African ancestry predict lower IQ. This continues to be true if you control for observable phenotypes like skin color. If you break IQ tests down into all the different cognitive abilities that they measure, it turns out the most heritable of those cognitive abilities are the ones that the races differ the most in. There are like 12 lines of evidence here. Those are just the first three that came to my mind. It is not a just so story.
Regardless of IQ, like we're not. When we look at somebody, we're not deciding what race they are based on their IQ. We're not deciding what race they are based on phenotypes or based on their genetics. We're just looking at them to decide what race they are. And so that's what I mean.
Phenotype means.
Well, that's what I mean when saying that these things come from something else is not the same as saying when I look at somebody, I can see something that I will categorize in a certain way and call them black or call them white. And so that's what I mean when I say, like, I'm just judging it based on, like, skin color. Obviously, there's more to it than that. Most of these things will align with skin color, and we will categorize it based on those things. So, that's what I mean when I say that. Obviously, it comes from genetics and things like that. It's just that's not what we decide whether or not to call somebody black based on.
Okay,
it's
so
also not how it was instituted into the law.
I think I can clear this up real quick. We're talking about two different things, okay? You're talking about a societal effect that is based on phenotype, how people recognize it and treat people based on their phenotypes, right?
Yeah, sure.
Okay, now what I'm talking about and what Sean is talking about is the cause of those phenotypical differences. Use a different word if you want to. Make one up. It doesn't matter. The genetic variations which lead to those phenotypical differences in people, which lead to other differences like in cognitive ability as well. And so it's like we're call it ancestry if you want, but we're saying that to go back all the way back and answer Coder's question, it's like the reason why some people built civilization, built the wheel, built the printing press, built even spaceships, all the way down to spaceships, okay, and lasers and stuff, and some people didn't, is because of their ancestry and their genetic variations, which are wildly different from these other groups of people that have genes which lead to different phenotypes, which also lead to being treated differently by people in society.
If you look at history through the lens of explicitly genetics, then you're leaving out most of history.
Well, no, I mean, again, it's just that those are it's also something else that exists objectively and is real in the world, which you're denying exists and is real in the world. And that's why we focus on it.
Yeah. It seems like scientists deny what you guys are categorizing as race because it seems like they're much more likely to use things like clines, which don't line up along racial lines. So we can talk about clines, like that's a real thing that is like there are like biological categorizations that are useful through clines, but these don't line up along racial
Yeah,
lines.
real quick, I want to make this clear. I'm not denying that what you guys are saying is true. I'm saying we wouldn't have enough evidence to know whether or not it's true. So we can't objectively say this is not true. I just don't think we could also objectively say that it is true. I think there's evidence to go both directions right now. And so like I wouldn't feel comfortable saying that one or the other is true. But to get back to what we were talking about, like before we went down this line, is essentializing somebody based on the color of their skin doesn't mean that now we have to give them credit based on the color of their skin. We can give somebody credit based on the actions that they actually had, or like based on whatever it is that they achieved, right? I don't think that like Obama is super great because he was the first black president. I don't think like all of a sudden because he was black, all of his achievements became something completely different because of the color of his skin, just as the same as I wouldn't think the same as like George Bush or Bill Clinton or anybody else.
Well, sure. When we're talking about individuals, you judge an individual by his achievements. However, we were talking about on a societal, civilizational level, how some people ended up building all of Western civilization and some people didn't. And that those people who did build it, their story, which also includes a lot of grievances against other groups, is the greatest story in the history of mankind and has led us to live in the greatest civilization in the history of mankind. And you would deny the descendants of those people the right to that story while only focusing on the evils and missteps of their people. And that's
not true. Nobody would deny that white people have done better throughout society. Like nobody would deny that, dude. Nobody denies that.
Coder was denying it earlier tonight.
No, I never. Okay, you kept saying that I was denying that like a white person. I said that white people at some point in time invented a wheel. People who were white at one point in time invented a wheel, and then that spread across the world. Not just like it spread across other white people who didn't invent the wheel as well, right?
Right, and it's like that the conditions which come about, which bring about any invention, there are cultural conditions that the person who invented it owes part of their achievement to. It's like Albert Einstein, like I said earlier, he lived in a society which was ready for that, which prepared him and educated him and had all the tools necessary and all of the reading and the history and all of the education for him to be able to go with his achievements. And so it's like, it's not just one person out of blue made up a wheel out of nowhere, and it could have happened anywhere. It had to happen in a specific place, in a specific time, in a specific civilization, along with every single other invention of white people, which everyone else didn't invent.
But I mean, well, and also you say that credit, you're not going to give someone credit because of their race or whatever, but you do think certain obligations can be bestowed on someone because of their race, right?
Yeah, somewhat, but do you guys believe in like cultural appropriation? Like, do you think that that's like a legitimate thing? Like, if Eminem goes and starts rapping, do you guys think that like he's stealing black culture or something like that?
There's a way to copy cultural traditions of people that is offensive, but there's also a way to do it that's not offensive.
I mean, I have an anime profile pic.
Sure, but being offensive isn't really what I'm talking about. I'm talking about appropriating it. Like, I don't think that a culture can own some sort of idea. I don't think that black people own rap to where white people can't just go do it themselves and have their own thing.
But it's not about owning, it's about who came up with it, the idea.
That's what you're saying, is that they own it because they came up with it, that they have a right to the idea.
Yeah, the key is why they produced those ideas and why they produced the kind of civilization they did. Because if you want to look at the modern situation and say, look at all this inequality, oh my gosh, these minorities aren't doing so well, your explanation of why that is determines what you think we should do about it. An explanation that blames white people, even if you say it's not literally your fault in a moral sense, but in a material sense, that people who were white did the things that caused these differences.
That's a very shallow way of thinking of it. Like, to blame white people, it's blaming a culture, it's blaming a society, it's blaming a country, it's blaming a way of life, but it's not blaming white people.
So for instance, let's take the antebellum South. Do you blame everyone in that society? The slaves, did they do it?
No. Like
Come
to
on,
say that those people
silly.
were white is still a very shallow way of looking at it. That's ridiculous. Like we don't do this in any other thing. Like we say that as a country, meaning like the government, meaning the culture, meaning the society, like as a country, we allowed things to happen. We not only allowed it to happen, but perpetuated it and pushed it on
But
other
the problem
people.
is,
what's the catchphrase here? Is it country privilege?
right?
Well,
you're
no,
not
the
calling
country
it critical
still.
country
Hold on, that
privilege.
has absolutely nothing to do with what I just said. Like when we're talking about whether or not we oppressed a certain group, that doesn't mean that like as a country, still as a country, so I don't believe in reparations, but say we were to pay reparations, black people pay taxes too. They would, Latino people pay taxes too. They would all be paying into the same things. They would all be paying for the faults of what you think we're just blaming on white people, yet we want everybody to pay for it as a country. It's the country that did these things, not just white people.
Well, no, absolutely.
So if I come to everyone in a room and take $5 from, say, each person in the room and then give all that money to one of those people, do you not see any sense in which that's clearly a redistribution of resources from one kind of
Sure,
people?
it is.
You didn't ask us about our implementations of reparations. Like,
Yeah.
you're just assuming that it would all, like, it would only, anyone who identifies as black, okay, here's the money. Like,
Yeah,
I
I
know
don't.
this is stupid.
As I said, I don't agree with reparations, but that's a straw man of reparations. It's more like if we go into a room and take all of the money from just black people, then later on, when we say, okay, we need to give the money back, everybody's saying, well, if you just give it back to the black people, that's racist. That's more legitimate. Like, no, if we're going to take money from people, we have to give it back to just the people we took it from.
Right, and so that's the key point, that if you think the reason why black people right now don't have money is because, quote, we, in whatever sense you mean that word, took it from them, that's one thing. If you think the reason is something else, such as a cultural thing, such as a genetic thing, then suddenly that line of reasoning doesn't make sense.
Yeah.
So that's why it's so important to talk about something like whether or not genetics explains these civilizational differences.
Yeah, sure. I don't think that it's a genetic thing. I don't think that we took it from them based on genetics.
So earlier you said that you didn't know, right? Because
No, he's not saying we took it from them at all. He's
No.
not. That's the point. You're still not understanding. He's not saying. He's saying we didn't take it from them at all. He's saying it's explained by something other than us taking it from them. That's his point.
What?
Sure. So the like inhibitors on wealth accumulation, for example, right? Like, so preventing certain people from owning property, preventing certain people from getting loans to start businesses, burning down Black Wall Street. These are ways of making sure that black communities ended up where they are today.
Yeah, Jim Crow, like redlining, like.
And all of this explains it so much better than maybe one day we'll find this genetic factor that explains it.
And again,
right. So that is the competing explanation, and we can look at each one of those things individually, and then determine the validity of each of them.
Well, the effect is cumulative.
Well,
but
yeah,
we can
and
talk
the
about
effects
each one.
of it. But yes, I agree.
But right. So you look at something. I mean, there's no good evidence though that these things that happened so long ago had a negative economic impact that today explains a significant part of why it is that, for instance, black Americans are poorer than white Americans.
There's
But by
probably
contrast,
more
there's
evidence
very
of
good
that
evidence
than anything
that
ever.
Sorry.
There's
Black
very
Americans
good
alive
evidence by
today
contrast that IQ does.
There's black Americans alive today who were literally not allowed to go to like most of the well-off schools in America. Like,
weren't allowed to
It,
work at
like-
certain places. They weren't allowed
Yeah,
to
weren't
invest
allowed to go
money in
into certain
certain
places.
neighborhoods based on.
had to use worse water fountains.
Yeah.
Like, these things aren't going to have any effect like within like a generation or two.
Well, I mean, there are a few things. So first, there are a bunch of things. So firstly, that's a very small number of people. Secondly, we need to get specific about the size of the effect that even those things had at the time. The vast majority of African Americans alive today existed in a period in which the differences in, for instance, educational spending by race were either marginal or favored black
Does that
people.
include, hang on, can I stop you there? Because this was in your article that I read. Does that include the when you say the per pupil spending there, are you including the spending from parents and community members? Or are we just talking about government per pupil spending?
No, I'm talking about the amount of money the government spends on the schools.
Okay, so you're kind of ignoring like a huge factor, right? You're kind of like it almost feels.
Well, see, this is
I don't want to accuse you of bad faith, but it almost feels dishonest, to be honest.
So that would be, I think, a result, because you said you read that article. I have another article called Racial Differences in Inheritance that I think directly deals with what you're talking about. The problem is I have a bunch of different articles on all the different sort of things. So maybe if you only read one of them and you say what something's missing from it, you get a weird idea.
Well, so the point of what I asked is that if we only look at per pupil spending in terms of government spending, then we're not accounting for the other benefits that white people on average have much more access to. And this includes communities, this includes networks, this includes other financial resources themselves that they can donate to the school, that they can go into the school and also they can lend their time and efforts into the school to also improve education attainment. Like if you just look at per pupil spending from the government, you're blinding yourself to the entire situation. And it feels intentional. I hope that you're not doing that.
It's obviously not intentional. I mean, this is such a weird thing to say because presumably you know that it is very often claimed by liberals that per pupil spending by the government differs in such a way so as to disadvantage black people, and that's what I was responding to in the article.
I never said that.
No, you didn't, but you started referencing
in the article.
The article.
Yeah, I mean,
in the article, I was literally responding to specific claims by specific people. This is very weird to now accuse me of like bad faith for something like that. If you look at
Well, hang on. Can I push back? Because it seems like what you were talking about in that article, if I remember correctly, was per pupil spending and how it impacts educational achievement. So if we're talking about how per pupil spending impacts educational achievement, we can't leave off the other stuff, right? We can't.
Okay, so let's just get away from my article though, because no one here but you and I have read that article. Let's just talk about what you're talking about.
We have moved away from the article. We're just talking about the idea of per pupil spending.
Yeah. So if you look at something like parental income, right, and you look at educational achievement. So for instance, we can look at something like the fact that poor white kids end up doing better on the SATs than do rich black kids, right? So if you want to say something like, oh, it's because the parents are spending all of this money, that does not seem to be true. And we know that it is a fact that if you control for IQ, not only do the racial differences in educational attainment, they don't go away, they reverse. So the black people are now doing better. By contrast, I know of no such evidence with regards to something like the networks that parents have that they use to somehow advantage their kids with education.
Do you think that white people on average have like more access to like certain like networks and communities that are going to improve access to things for their kids? Do you think that's like not a true thing in America?
It's true to some extent, but I don't think that explains much in the way of educational differences by race. And you have to ask, why are those differences there to begin with?
Why wouldn't that be like a pretty significant factor when we're looking at educational attainment by race?
It's a weird question to ask. Why wouldn't it be? It's just an empirical question.
Well, I'm saying
those sorts of things.
My point is that it is. And you say it's a weird. You say it's a weird thing to look at. I think it makes more. It's weird to not look at it.
Well, when I'm asking, so I mean, there are a few things. So what I'm saying is, like I said before, it's just the fact that if you control for IQ, suddenly the racial differences in educational attainment reverse. So just as a starting point, do you have similar analogous evidence with respect to this networking variable?
Yeah, but so obviously we disagree about like the causes of that IQ thing. Like we disagree about the ways that IQ can be changed in youth, right? So we're not going to.
Well, I mean, again, it's like you look at the average IQs in sub-Saharan Africa, and you look at the average IQs in Europe, and it's like it's obvious, man. It's like Europeans didn't just like come from civilization having everything gifted to them. They created all of this wealth. They created all of these systems and institutions. They created all of these civilizations and all the achievements therein. And it's like they did that out of nowhere. It wasn't handed to them by anyone. It wasn't just inherited and we've been keeping it from everyone else. We built it. And so like these other people that have now come into our institutions, come into our society and civilization, who are not doing as well, even when they are like better off in terms of socioeconomic status. It's like you're ignoring all of that because you have this worldview. You just want to say that it's white people's fault anyway.
Just real quick, if we all agree already that we don't need to essentialize it based on race, I don't know why. Like I don't think we need to even argue the race realism part of this. Like if we all agree that like it's not about like just race and achievements based on race, then like we don't need to argue that part of it. We need to argue whether or not you think that we are essentializing black people and then therefore giving them more credit or allowing them like more fault than others based on their race, right?
Well, that's obviously happening. That's what affirmative action is. I mean, I was just talking to a scientist just earlier today, who was talking about how there's a struggle that she's having with these with the diversity hires, that they're not staying around. It's like and a big part of it is even people that she feels are more qualified than her because of the affirmative action policies, which put them in.
I have to keep like
they don't feel as qualified.
like centering this conversation, because they keep moving back to race realism every time for no reason.
For people that were more qualified than they are, and they're not writing as many papers as her and their peers because they have this feeling that it's like undeserved. So like they even know that this is the case. They know that they're having all of these privileges granted to them that are largely unearned by virtue of the fact of competition, that they are not outcompeting other people who they've now taken the place of just because they're black.
So would you say that it's also like just as unearned when we talk about people inheriting or like getting jobs based on like connections their parents have, or they get into a school because their parents knew someone who had certain connections and stuff?
Yeah, I mean, sure. People that have imposter syndrome due to that type of thing they have the same feeling as well. Yeah, but what she said is like they're coming to meetings in their diversity trainings, and they're finding that it's a huge problem that they're not retaining any of these diversity hires. It seems to be that only the white men are sticking around throughout their careers and not leaving and going into other jobs and workplaces, or leaving for families like the women do.
Maybe the company that your friend works at needs to do some better stuff.
Again,
no, it's a government thing.
Even if that's true, I don't think it matters. So again, like if we look at whether or not Black people were oppressed at some point. Like, and I think we all agree on that part, right? Like, at least, like, slavery did something, right? What we should be talking about is whether or not this had an effect to where right now there would be something that would affect them currently to where we would need to do something about it, or to where they would have some sort of disadvantage right now. And I think
here's the problem with that. The problem with that is that people like you refuse to recognize that those people who their ancestors went through all that stuff are still better off, according to every metric, in every way, than the people that are still back home in Africa. And that they're better off. They have more advantages. They have more opportunities than all of those people. And you ignore that. You ignore that they have a greater chance at success in the world than any of those people. You just want to talk about how they're not as well off as the Europeans, who are descendants of the people who built civilization. And why?
I think Sean.
I also wanted to say, with respect to the slavery question and how long the effects would last. I mean, there's data on this. One way to get to this, and
I'm sorry. Can I clarify real quick? I didn't mean that like the effects from slavery would last a long time. What I meant was that we can all agree that they were oppressed at some point. Like that's at least one part that we can all agree on, that they were oppressed at some point. It's just the fact that like whether or not there are some sort of oppression tactics or oppressive tactics that would affect them currently. And then like me and Radical Coder would more argue things like redlining or Jim Crow or funding for schools, or like all sorts of other things that actually have the effects that still last today, not slavery in and of itself.
Yeah.
So if you're not arguing that it's like still a thing that's causing problems for people still today, then why is that all we're hearing about all the time?
Well, slavery is the reason that we ended up with Jim Crow, right? Like without slavery, we wouldn't have had Jim Crow. So like Jim Crow was just the next step in a line. But once slavery was over, these people were citizens and deserved all of the freedoms that everybody else had, but they didn't get those. Those things were stolen from them. They were robbed from them. And so we're saying
over and over again.
What are the specific things that Jim Crow did that you feel that there's strong evidence explains current disparities in racial outcomes?
Well, so like I said, like redlining is one thing where we can see that like they weren't allowed to have investments in certain areas because those areas, and I will admit, like those areas were deemed to be unsafe and likely to be vandalized, likely to have worse workers, and so therefore they didn't feel as though they could make money. But they were deemed to be worse and more dangerous based on the color of the people's skin that lived in that area.
So that is not true.
That is
the idea of redlining was mainstream in sociology in the 1960s. Then from the 70s to the 90s, there was a long list of empirical studies trying to see if this was in fact true. If you look in those cities where redlining was said to be happening, and you look at those neighborhoods and you control for a bunch of differences in economically relevant variables, the actual risk of giving a loan to someone in that area, then is it true that someone getting applying for a loan from a very black area in that city had a harder time getting a loan? And the answer to that overwhelmingly across this literature was no.
It wasn't that the people who lived there were having a harder time getting a loan. It was that people who wanted to put a business inside of the red lines couldn't get a loan to start a business within those areas, and therefore the people who lived in those areas didn't have the same economic advantages that everybody else that had.
And that's just one way that black people were barred from those resources, right? Like there's even like just like cultural norms that will like hold people like.
So why do you think it is that they didn't want to give them a loan to open a business in the neighborhood? I mean, you're saying it's just because they were black people, but what is the evidence of that?
Yeah, okay, so if we know that like black people will commit crimes at a higher rate, and we feel as though like a black neighborhood then is more likely to have vandalization or have worse workers or have worse management or something like that because there are black people that live there. That's not how statistics work. Like, we can't say that just because black people are more likely to do this thing, now that if you build a business where black people will work, those black people are now more likely to do those things. That's not how stats work. You can't say that just
because, how racism works. Though.
Yes, that is how racism works. You can't say that just because they are black, they are more likely to commit crimes. That's not how that works in any way whatsoever.
Yeah, I know. That's just a fact. Black people are more likely to commit crime. What are you talking about?
But saying black people are more likely to commit crimes is not the same thing as saying you are more likely to commit a crime because you are black.
True.
Sure, but regardless of the and for the record, I also happen to think that's true. But even setting that to the side, even if that wasn't true, it would still mean that there are non-racist reasons for banks, for instance, not to give a loan to someone who's trying to start a business in this area. Because
sure,
the people
so
there
we're
are
talking about
just so stories come in. Hang on. This is where the just so stories come in, right? Because you look at the snapshot in history and you say, okay, well, look at these conditions around, and you ignore all of the context of how those conditions arise. Then you can paint a bit like, well, look at this. Of course they would refuse loans. Of course they would refuse loans to these people in this area because look at all these horrible conditions. But if you don't talk about how those conditions came, like where those conditions came from, how they arose, and why, then you're not actually trying to solve the problem. You're not looking at it honestly.
So I agree with that, but every time we've tried to start to get to the bottom of the explanation for these things and then try to drill into the genes,
you keep concluding that it's IQ genes, but there's a much better explanation that we keep talking about, which is the long established, well-documented history of dehumanization of black people in America.
Yeah, even if the race and IQ thing was
so again,
true,
the evidence here is not even close to analogous. I mean, what you're doing is a combination of claims that are just false, and there are claims that are stories that we don't have good evidence for. By contrast, the evidence on things like IQ.
Wait! Don't skip over that. What are the stories that we don't have evidence for? What are you talking about?
So, like for instance, earlier when I told you, I said this directly to you. I said, so on the one hand, we have the data on IQ and education that I think explains the disparity because that's what the statistics show. Do you have evidence? Because you were talking about a networking effect. Is there empirical evidence you have that is analogous in strength to the evidence on IQ that networking explains these disparities? And you just ignored that. Right?
So first of all, I didn't say that networking. First of all, I didn't say that networking by itself is the only thing that like causes these disparities. I said that networking is one of many factors and one of many ways that black people have been barred from certain institutions. Right. And so obviously this plays a factor. I don't know how you can say it doesn't, honestly.
Right. So this is what I mean. By contrast, if you said to me, how can you say genes and IQ play a factor? I would never say, well, it's just obvious. I don't see how you could say it doesn't. I started talking about research that empirically demonstrates.
Hang on.
Can I stop
you though? Like, do you think that I believe there's absolutely nothing involved? Like there's nothing that genes have no impact on IQ in any way at all? Have I given that impression?
No.
Okay, well then that's not the point I'm making, right? So I'm saying, like you said, like there might be some impact of genes, maybe not necessarily among populations, but there might be some impact of genes on IQ, but that doesn't mean that it's the only factor or the predominant factor.
Yeah,
right?
Even if you were correct about race and IQ, even if you were correct, that wouldn't mean that all of a sudden all of these inequalities are explainable just by that. It would still mean
I totally agree that it wouldn't mean that like deductively. It's just an empirical question. And as it happens, if you control for just IQ, the racial differences in educational attainment reverse. And these are all just social scientific questions that we have answers to with respect to IQ because it's a long, vast literature.
Yeah, but this is like when you say it like that, this sounds like a, correlation equals causation sort of thing, where we could look at like socioeconomic factors that could have could play into IQ, and I know that there are things that line up for that. I'm saying the way that you answered that question right there makes it sound as though it's just a correlation equals causation, which is not the case. We can look at the fact that there are other things that barred them from having success in America, and even if IQ was one of those factors, it wouldn't mean that all of these other problems are now justified, that all of the things that were taken from them are now justified.
So I'm not concerned with a justification. It's kind of a moral question, who knows? But the empirical questions matter, I think. And so measuring something like, I know that you're not saying that, this is just an example. Yeah, I know that you're not saying that today we still see the effects of slavery and that explains bottom disparities. But there are empirical, examinations of that suggesting that the direct effects of slavery lasted for a couple generations, for instance. I think it's important to just look at the specific variables, what the effect size actually was, how long it lasted. And the only, if you do that, then what you come up with is the kind of so-called racist conclusions that, well, yeah.
Yeah, so I would actually say that what you said I wouldn't say about slavery. I think it's a defensible statement, and that the legacy of slavery is why we still perceive to this day black people. I mean, I don't, but a lot of people to this day still perceive black people as separate than white people in some fundamental way. This is the result of like hundreds of years of subjugation and dehumanization that continues to be played up by people, especially arguing that certain groups of people are inherently dumber, for example, and that this explains all of the problems, despite having, again, a long, well-documented history in America of these same people being barred from access to certain things, being enslaved and then eventually unenslaved. But unless they commit a crime, it's no coincidence, mind you, that black people are the most likely to be incarcerated and also were the people who were enslaved. This is not a coincidence. This is the end result of slavery.
Right, so that's just not, I mean, that's just the story. That is literally just a story, right? You just said, so I don't even know how I'm supposed to respond to you just saying a thing.
Yeah.
Well, no, that's a causal claim that you would need rigorous evidence for.
Like,
right?
What, that slavery happened?
That slavery explains why it is that black people in America have a high incarceration rate, which, by the way, is similar to their incarceration rate elsewhere in the world, which is a bit strange since not everywhere had that same kind of slavery.
Well, okay. When I say there might be other situations that lead to other people who might look the same having similar incarceration rates.
It's a crazy thing. Everywhere Africans go, they run into some coincidental situation that makes them poor and criminal, relatively speaking.
No, I don't think that.
Well, conveniently, we're not talking about everywhere. We're talking about one specific line of history that led directly to a very obvious situation. If we didn't know anything about black people, and we just heard about the story of what happened to black people in America, you would predict that these people would be in a worse situation compared to the group that did the subjugation, right?
If we knew what about the story of black people? If the only thing you knew was slavery,
if we just knew what happened, if we just knew the whole history, we knew just what happened to black people throughout American history.
No.
How can you say?
Because about 50 years ago, the environment's changed in such a way so as to begin to systematically favor black people. And if you have a sense of how long environmental effects tend to last, then you'll conclude that probably there's not still some kind of negative effect. And also the counterfactual is relevant here. I know Miyo was talking about this earlier. The actual relevant counterfactual is what if they were still in Africa, and obviously they'd be much worse off. But and none of this all just gets away. I mean, sorry?
Do you think everywhere in Africa is worse than everywhere, do you think every single community in the United States is better than every single community in Africa, like by every metric?
Pretty much.
I don't know. I don't think so. I don't think that's
pretty much the only places in Africa that are better off than anywhere at all in the United States by like any metric of quality of life are places that are still majority white and run by whites. So that you're making the opposite point of what you think you are, man. It's like there are places in America that are run by majority black people in the government who have the majority of the business done by blacks and Latino Hispanics that are way worse off than some places in like South Africa, for instance, that are like still run, have most of the business owners. It's like you're actually making a point for race essentialism in terms of quality of life. So like
I'm sorry,
no,
these things just
you
aren't
can
relevant
not think so all you
in
want,
any way.
but I know the data on this. I know the history on it, and it makes perfect sense, honestly.
You can say it makes sense, but it's not relevant in any way. Like, again, when we're talking about white people in this country, what rights they should have, like, this isn't relevant. Whether or not they're
has
incarcerated.
equal rights in this country now, man, and they have for a long time. That's the point.
Talking about. I'm not saying that they don't have equal rights now. I'm saying that in the past they did not have equal rights, and this did disadvantage them, and they still have those disadvantages now. And when it comes to like incarceration rates, we can look at things like single parent households. We can look at things like education and like the schools that are predominantly black, or we can look at like business opportunities in certain areas. Like, we can look at so many other things and see that these are like much clearer explanations for the outcomes that we currently have than saying like, well, maybe they have lower IQs, so that explains it, right? Like, even if that is a factor, hold on. Oh, even if that is a factor, it doesn't change all of these other things that we're mentioning. Those are still factors.
But each of those things themselves have to have a deep explanation. So you look at something like single parenthood, and in the first place, I should say single parenthood families don't have nearly as big of an effect on criminality as conservatives sometimes like to make. But they have some effect. We'll say there's some effect. But you have to ask, why do they have such a low rate of two-parent homes? Not only here, but also that's another thing that tends to be a consistent pattern of African populations around the world.
My understanding is the whole thing about fatherless homes is actually kind of misleading. A lot of these things are unmarried, but
it's not fatherless. I said single parent. Yes, not fatherless.
Yeah, in fact, black fathers are actually more likely to be in their child's life than white parents, white fathers.
No, that's not true.
It is true.
It's not. I mean, there's a government report that says that, but what they do is rather misleading.
They lied. Yeah.
They didn't. Well, it's kind of like a misleading.
It's not. Hold on. Just to clarify, it's not the father. It is a father figure.
It's not a literal. I'm not accusing them of literally committing fraud or something like that.
Yeah,
right?
It's just a father figure, not the father. Yeah.
So if you look at the proportion, and firstly, it is true that the marriage statistics can be misleading because it more often happens in the African American community than the white community, that there are two parents at the home, but they're just not married. That said, you can just look directly at two parents actually being dead. The gap is lesser, but there is still a gap. Now, it is also true that there are measures by which if you only look at those parents who are with their kids, that then African-American fathers score higher on various measures of involvement than do white fathers. But that's not the issue with that. Is that that's a lower proportion of African-American males to begin with. That's a more elite sample, so to speak, of African-American males than it is white males, because the overwhelming, it's a higher number of white males in the first place that are actually staying with their kids. Do you see what I'm saying, and why that is therefore a misleading number? It's not actually accusing them of lying.
I'd have to read the whole thing. I'd be interested in looking at it again. Right.
So this is the part where now I'm going to say genes, and then you're going to say but all of history, and then I'll say but genes, and then you'll say but all of history.
Hold on,
that does seem to be how the conversation's gone. Yeah, I agree.
Hold on. The difference is that we're not excluding your argument. You are excluding our argument. We're saying that like yours can still be one of the factors in what it is that we're talking about, but that doesn't exclude all of these other factors at the same time. Whereas you're saying, well, I just want to focus on this one little factor right here and exclude everything else.
Okay, now here's the thing about that though, is you are sort of excluding our argument and what we're saying, and of course there's another point beside it that you haven't really acknowledged even, much less gotten to, which is that these populations and these people, you're like, well, we don't care about Africa, we don't care about anything else happening in the rest of the world which could offer explanations for some of this stuff. What we're gonna say is that it only matters what's happened here and things that white people did wrong to these other people. And it's like what we're saying is that relative to where they lived in Africa, relative to their continent and their countries and all of that, they are still way better off. And it's like you're talking about it. All you ever say is that we've denied these people opportunities, whereas what's really happened is, by virtue of the fact of them being here as full citizens with the same rights as we have in the civilization and countries we created, We've given them the best opportunities out of any blacks in the world
This is
today,
also
and in
irrelevant.
all of human history, actually. And you refuse to acknowledge that because you only want to talk about minor missteps,
Okay, fine.
pitfalls,
Okay, fine.
things that little
Okay,
laws or
hold on.
little legal
Okay.
institutions, little things that a school does.
Okay.
Little legal
We get your point.
institutions, little
Yes.
things that schools do.
Okay, we get your point. Okay, so say that they were excluded, that they were oppressed in a bunch of ways, and that they are disadvantaged, right? Let's just assume that is true for just 1 second for a simple premise. Okay, let's say that is true. But they are better off than other black people in the rest of the world. Does that mean that we don't fix it now and we don't work for equality because they're better off than everybody else, so they should just take it and be happy with good enough?
Yeah, no, what we're saying is...
No, I need you to answer that question, because that was your entire point, was that they are better off than other black people in other countries, so they should just be happy with what they get.
No, that wasn't my point, and I was answering your question. So what we're saying is that the equality that you're striving for, it will not exist for the reasons which cause the same reasons which caused them to not build the great civilizations which we built in the first place. And it's like, if you want to talk about like
you're essentializing race again, dude. We already said that we weren't going to essentialize it, and you keep going back to essentialize it.
No, you guys are also essentializing
No,
it,
we're
just in the
not.
opposite direction.
No, we're not.
Okay, so
you would
so
need to
if you wanna
demonstrate
talk
that.
about
You keep saying
creating
that.
ways-
Please demonstrate that at some point, because I can easily demonstrate that you are essentializing
Who
it.
cares if we're essentializing race?
Because you're saying that you're not essentializing it. If you want to own it, then own it. But don't keep saying I'm not essentializing it, and then going back to
Sean
saying,
doesn't own it.
well,
Again,
we as white
I'm not
people
sure
built
what that
this.
has to do with what I'm saying. I mean, what I'm
Oh my
saying is that
goodness.
to answer your previous question is that there's it's the same thing, the same factors which cause our people to build civilization and theirs not to, are going to lead always to differences in outcomes between us and them in our countries. Now, if you want to talk about certain specific policies and how to make them not biased, then that's a conversation I'd love to have. If you want to talk about policy bias in the education system, if you want to talk about some sort of bias which could negatively affect any group within any system within the United States and ways in which they could be corrected, I wouldn't have a problem with that. But if you want to talk about equal outcomes for people that will always have different outcomes, and if you wanted to just like keep going and calling it systemic racism and calling it like what white evils being visited upon them still forever that will never get over and they'll never end, because we will never have equal outcomes, which is the point of what we're saying, then that's a conversation we're not willing to have and we'll always push back against, because it's never going to take place in reality, and it's going to bring about the kind of worse and worse anti-white rhetoric, which will lead to the white genocide that I've been talking about, which will lead to little Timmy, which is going to get worse and worse for it.
I just need to throw this in there real quick, because this is the problem with this conversation. This is why we're going in circles, is because when you say we're not essentializing race, then we start making arguments that are not essentializing race. But then when you argue against us essentializing race again, we don't know what to argue against. If we're not arguing against essentializing race, then we should be, me in Radical Coder this entire time would have been arguing against essentializing race instead of making points that don't essentialize race.
So Sean just talked about genetic differences, and you just said we're not excluding what you're saying. We're acknowledging all of that, and we're still talking about the historical stuff as well. Now you're saying that, like, oh, well, talking about racial differences in genetics is like, oh, well, it's changing the whole conversation. Which one is it, dude?
That's not what we said. We said that even if that was true. Go ahead, Ryan.
No, I was going to say that we're not shutting down the idea that genes can have an impact on intelligence. We're pushing back against all of the other things that you're using this to load on to race relations.
We're saying that can be true, but even if it was true, that doesn't exclude everything else that we're saying. We're not granting that it is true or isn't true. We're saying even if that was true, there's still all of these other things that we would have to address.
CG wanted me to drop their super chat. I think it's this one. Reality is that the total wealth of 40 million African Americans is twice that of sub-Sahara Africa. 3.9 trillion versus 1.9 trillion. I'm guessing that's what T is. Wait, what is this? 3.9 T versus 1.9
Yes,
T.
Samurai.
African
Exactly.
Americans having access to white people
That's
is their
exactly.
biggest boom. I don't really know what they mean, but you want me to
Yeah, that's exactly right. That's exactly the point that I've been making this whole time. Is they're way better off in every way. You want to talk about like little ways in which that like white people might have like one policy or another wrong that could be negatively impacting them, and talk about it like it's the most evil thing, like we've been the ones holding them back this whole time, which feeds into all of this we was kings and queens until the white people came and stomped us out type of bullshit. But then it's like but what really happened is that white people were the best thing that ever happened to them. The people who are alive today, right now, not their ancestors.
Yeah. So
and
again,
you're not teaching them that.
Okay. So again, the thing you're doing here is you're saying that because these things happen, that it was you're not saying it was justified, but you're saying that the outcomes were good, that this thing happened. But you can't say that unless you're comparing them to other outcomes that could have happened. And you don't have that. You don't have on Earth where African countries
it's what he just did.
Wait. You don't have a world where African countries were not colonized and exploited in the way that they were. You don't have this world, and you can't make any claims about it. So stop.
Well, what we're talking about right now is wealth disparity, and I think we can make claims about that. Certainly, like I said earlier, the fact is the more colonized an area was, the wealthier it ended up being. So you're right. If not for European colonization, the gap would be far larger because the current African continent as it exists has been made much wealthier via colonization than it otherwise would have been.
But it could have been made richer in other ways, right? You think colonization was the only way that the African countries could ever become
I
that
thought you
rich?
just said we can't speak to a world which doesn't exist. Yeah, how do you know that?
My whole point is that there are more ways that this could go than what you're saying, right?
Sure.
And how do you know that those would have provided better
outcomes? He didn't say that, Mio. He didn't say that, Mio.
That's my whole fucking point. We don't know which one of these would have been better.
So this is very similar to me. All we're talking about is, look, like the impact of colonization on Africa or something like that. If not for that, then it would have been poorer. Now, it's true that there are like logically possible things that could have happened in Africa that would have made them fabulously wealthy or whatever. But there's no reason to suppose that those things would have actually happened.
But again, nobody's saying that.
If I say to you, "Oh my gosh, why did you throw that brick through my window? You broke my window. If you hadn't thrown it, my window wouldn't have broken." You wouldn't say, "Well, wait a minute. Now there are other things we can imagine which could have broke that window."
This is not analogous in any way.
That's a terrible analogy.
Yes.
No, that's exactly what he's saying. He's like, well, who's to say that you wouldn't have been better off if your window wasn't broken?
No, because you are saying that. Hold on.
I'm just talking about the actual removal of things that we have empirical measures of, and then assuming that nothing dramatically changed, the history continued to go as it had gone for thousands of years.
Okay,
history couldn't have played out the way it did.
Hold on. Okay, so with your analogy, you guys are saying a brick went through the window, but if we had used a boulder or a basketball or a football or a baseball, it would still have broken the window either way. And we're saying you can't know that. You can't know. All we know is that a brick is what broke the window. And so, like, we can't just assume that everything else would have broken the window as well. And you guys are saying, no, we know that it would have broken the window no matter what. That is the difference. Is we're not making an exact claim to say this is what would or wouldn't have happened. We're saying we can't know. And you guys are saying we do know. And you can't know.
Yeah, it's more like if I said, let's use a different example, a different hypothetical. It's more like
if I talk directly about Africa.
Yeah,
if I invited you, Tom Foolery and Radical Coder, into my house and it has air conditioning, okay, and you're from a group of people who have a house without air conditioning, then I can say to you, let's say you're sitting in the warmest room in the house, and you'd say, you know what? This is bullshit. We have it worse off.
Okay.
You're keeping me down because you're keeping me in the warmest room of the house. And you know what? You're the bad guy. And it's like all you're
So
doing
let's
is
add in
pure evil.
Yeah.
And I said, you know what? Look at all the people that are in the house that doesn't have air conditioning.
Mhm.
You're still better off than them.
Yeah, see,
And you're
you just
saying,
told
me
you
wouldn't
weren't
know
making
me.
that
Hold on,
argument.
I'm almost done here.
You
I'm
said
almost
you
done
weren't
here.
making
Hey,
this argument just a minute ago. You literally told me I am not making that argument, and then you just now went back and made that exact argument.
I don't know which argument you're
said,
saying I'm
are
not
you
making.
saying that just because they're better off that they should just deal with it? And you said, no, I am not saying that. But this analogy is literally what you're saying.
That's
they
not
are
what I'm
better
doing at all.
off than
So
they would have been.
if you would have not interrupted me and allowed me to finish, then maybe you would understand what I'm saying better. So what I'm saying is, by looking at all the rest, I can say, look at the rest of the people who were in the house you came from, which has no air conditioning, and you're still better off than them. And while we can correct some things, while it could be that we can make it so the warmest room in the house gets better air conditioning, and that's a conversation I'd be willing to have, your categorization of it, that I'm keeping you down, is absolutely false. In
Who
fact,
are you
should
arguing
actually
against?
keep-
We haven't said that. Neither one of us have said that.
This analogy doesn't work because you're not including the fact that for this to be analogous, you have to have kidnapped my grandparents or something and then brought them into your air conditioning house.
Even
and
outside.
Then you work them like animals.
And you know
for
what?
a long
You'd
time.
still be
And then
better off than the people in the house.
You just
and then
did it
eventually
again.
You stopped
You
working
just
them like that.
did it
and
again.
then- yeah.
So here's why you're
make any
wrong,
sense.
Tom.
They're better
Here's why
off.
You're wrong.
Good enough, man. They're better off.
Here's why you're wrong. Is I just said I'd be willing to have a conversation about making the warmest room in the house cooler, making it better, providing better air conditioning to everybody in the house. But the categorization
but we're not
that
saying
what
that.
I did to you is just so wrong.
But we're
that
not saying
I'm the
that.
one holding you back.
We're not
that
saying
I'm
that.
the reason why the other house doesn't have air
We haven't said
conditioning
that.
is all false.
We haven't said
It's not
that.
about you, Mio.
We
If
haven't
can
said anything
get
about
this back
white
to
people
directly
doing.
Africa.
We didn't say
Yeah.
white people bad at any point.
Well, I think we're talking about America mainly. Africa's kind of a side note. You guys are kind of using like the current situation of Africans now and trying to compare that to African Americans, which for a lot of reasons doesn't really make sense, right? These people have virtually nothing in common.
Yeah, you would need circumstances plus
They have
trends
something.
plus
They
historical
do have
precedents,
something in
and we
common.
don't
In some
have
ways.
that. You
They look
only
similar
have
to- they
historical
look very similar to
precedent.
you.
So we're asking the counterfactual, right? If the mean things that white Americans did to black Americans didn't happen, what would the conditions of black people be? You don't think that's a relevant question?
Mm-mm.
Not really. No, not in this context.
Like
I mean, it might
we're
be
trying
like an
to.
interesting philosophical exercise. I
Yeah,
guess.
sure. Like I think it would be interesting, but in like what we're talking about is we're saying this is the situation that we are in, and this is what we're supposed to deal with. Is the situation that we are currently in.
Yep.
You're muted, Brittany.
Every time. Okay. Let me just read some of these.
Wow,
super
the rest
chats.
of you were just gonna let her keep talking, man. That's it.
They
This
do
is
that.
I
I
am
didn't realize.
I am like
I was
super
looking
pro
away.
woman. That's what it is. Is I am the only one who wants you to have a voice here, Brittany.
And at times, like,
I
I'm
don't
like,
see gender.
yelling and
I don't
doing
even-
I don't see gender.
Hey, you know,
I have to
Brittany
pee. I'm
knows.
listening now.
Brittany knows I'm a sexist. Okay, I'm happy to have her be silent the whole time.
That's true. Okay, so let's see here. Vosh fan said he sent in quite a few. Thank you again, Vosh fan. Low IQ plus low impulse control equals likely to resist arrest, steal what they want, act on angry impulses, smash local businesses over someone resisting arrest.
So if
So true, man.
okay, so if normally, like, if we look at people and say that this person is disadvantaged in some way, so if we look at someone and say, like, this person's psychotic, they're not able to, like, exist within society or follow rules the same as everybody else, or this person has a disability to where they're not able to exist within society the same as everybody else, normally we give them some sort of, like, a handicap because it doesn't seem fair to hold them to the same standard as everybody else. So if you actually believed that, your argument would be that we need to help them and give them the handicap because we don't believe that they can exist within society the same as everybody else. I don't believe that. I believe that they can exist within society the same as everybody else, and we have lots of examples of this to look at tons of black people, most black people who exist within society the same as everybody else, and don't commit crimes or don't run around like, burning down buildings or anything like that. Like, most black people do just fine. So if you truly believe that they cannot exist within society the same as white people, your argument would be to give them a handicap.
Well, that would be contingent on you accepting a very particular ideology, right?
I'm saying that if that was not me, you guys, if the person who's not you guys specifically, but the person who's asking that question, if he truly believes that they are incapable of existing within society the same as everybody else, then his argument should be that they would have a handicap just like anybody else who cannot exist within society the same as everybody else.
Assuming that that's what he wants to do with everyone else who can't exist.
I mean, yeah, unless he wants an ethno state or something like that.
True.
Well, it's simply if your worldview includes equal outcomes for everybody rather than equality of opportunity.
This is about opportunity. What Tom just described is about opportunity.
The handicap thing would also be totally different, because if it was just a thing of, look, due to genetic reasons, not their fault. Some white people have the same genes as them, whatever. It's not anyone's fault, but they have somewhat lower incomes. Let's give them a little help in such and such a way. That presumably would not lead to an avalanche of anti-white rhetoric across America and in the institution.
Right, exactly. That would be a totally different conversation.
Hold on. Again, that's different. We're saying
I'm
not saying that.
I'll be right back. Okay. I'll be right back, okay?
I'm sorry. I don't know if I'm not saying this correctly. I'm saying that if you believe that, your fix for this would be a handicap. I'm not saying that the rest of us believe this and we believe that black people should have a handicap. I'm saying if this is your argument and you truly believe in your argument, barring the fact that you think that all black people need to leave, or you want an ethno state, or you just want to kill them all or something like that, barring all of that, we would assume that you need to give them some sort of handicap. And if that's not your argument, then I don't believe that you really believe this.
Right. So I was making the difference, though, saying why it would still be very different than what we currently have. Also, there's another, I don't know why you're saying or an ethnicity, like kill them all. You could also just say, or individuals that have a propensity to fail in various ways should be allowed to fail to the degree that they're not stopped from failing by their local communities, right? Like, that's
not if they're handicapped.
An obvious other option rather than just like killing them.
No, not if society is built in a certain way for people who exist, or for people to exist within that society in a certain way. No, not if we say that most people exist within society in this way, therefore we have rules for those types of people. But if there's a whole group that is not that type of person, we would have to have a completely different set of rules for those people because they don't exist within society the same as the rest of us.
No, here's the thing, Tom. I actually agree with you. And that would be if everyone was going to be honest about the way things are in the world, and that was where the national conversation was at. That's where the future was headed, is a conversation like that. I would be happy to talk to you about something like that. That's actually more akin to what I believe would be best for them in the world. And really, that's the truth. However, where we're at right now, and this is sort of what Sean was getting at, is that instead what we have people denying all of these realities, which, by the way, I think is worse off for them. Imagine if they need a handicap. Imagine if that were true and you're all pretending that it doesn't exist. It's not real. You're the ones who are actually doing something that's worse for them. Imagine if that's how I see it. Now, that being said, where we're at, what we're seeing is, like he said, a whole slew of anti-white rhetoric because these people are denying these facts and this reality. Instead, they're blaming white people. They're saying we're keeping them down. And when these people are going to become the majority in America, not just blacks, but Hispanics as well, going to become the majority in America, and they're going to take political power in our countries from us, and they're going to be blaming us for the reason why they're not as well off as we are. Our people are going to be worse off for that. And now that's what I'm having to have a conversation about instead of a conversation about handicaps or whatever.
Yeah, again,
I wish we could have that conversation.
if you want to look, I'll make a deal with you. If you will, fight for equality and fixing systemic racism, or what we believe is there, and we get to that point, and now we can see that, like, without these disadvantages, black people still are not able to exist within society the same as white people, then I will be right there with you to say, you know what, we need something else. They just can't live up to white people's standards, so we need to have some sort of handicap, or we need a new plan. Okay? Deal?
No, I mean, that's been the plan for fucking like 70 years or something. Now people saying, oh,
No.
there's that famous quote about affirmative action would have to last a certain amount of time.
70 years? I'm sorry,
Exactly
when was the Civil
that.
Rights Act?
Well,
Real quick, when was the
finish.
Civil Rights Act? Yeah, go ahead, finish. Less than
I
70
was
years.
just saying that this has been something that people have been saying, for 70 years, that we can institute various programs that they'll equalize the environments, and that then we'll be able to not claim discrimination anymore and have an honest conversation about such and such. And that's
affirmative action
tried
benefits
to-
white women more than anybody else. Like, it's not a huge advantage for black people. There's not anything you can point to that has been a huge advantage for black people.
So do you not think that, for instance, controlling for qualifications on your college resume, you having a 20 times greater likelihood of being accepted into a college is a benefit?
So hang on. To be clear, you're more likely to get accepted into a particular college, but you are much more likely to be accepted into college across the board if you're white.
I'd say controlling for qualifications. I mean, that's true because of things like, say, SAT scores.
I'm also saying controlling.
Yeah,
Yeah,
if we're
controlling for
controlling
things.
for qualifications, yes, the black person is more likely, for sure.
To get into a specific college.
Yes,
across the
and
board.
it's a very
College.
small
It's
amount
not
of
just
black
one
people.
college. It's a bunch of colleges. It's like every college
single
that's been
college is-
analyzed.
There's not a large amount
No,
of
if you
black
actually
people
control
that,
directly for IQ without even looking at any particular college, the educational attainment is higher.
again, even if
It's
we
a
look at
radical
this, that's not even part of the argument. The point is that there is not a large amount of black people that take advantage of this circumstance. So,
You
my
think a lot of
point.
black people apply to college?
No, it's that they don't actually end up in the circumstances where affirmative action would apply, where them and other white people or Asian people have the same exact qualifications, to where the tiebreaker would be race.
So they're competing against the other people that are applying to the same college, right? So if a black person applies to, maybe it's not Harvard or Yale or whatever, it's just some public university, then yeah, I mean, they're obviously going to be competing against white people who have similar scores, because there's a sorting mechanism before you even, by where you apply.
Right. Again, I'm not disagreeing that black people get the advantage, but when you control for pretty much all else. But what I'm saying is that there aren't a large amount of black people that actually benefit from this, and when it comes to affirmative action, it helps white women more than anybody, meaning that it's still white people in the end who get a leg up from affirmative action, not black people.
What specific kind of affirmative action are you talking about? Because obviously you're not talking about college admissions.
Well, college admissions was part of it for a long time, but now mostly it's like jobs and like raises, promotions, things like that, sports. Yeah.
Well, now sports, granted, I've never looked into sports, but in terms of the jobs, I mean, the primary outcome there presumably would be income. And again, if you control for a whole set of things and actually compare apples to apples, black people make more than white people as a whole.
Wait, what? Say that again?
I said, with reference to jobs, the primary outcome we presumably would all care about would be income. That if you control for variables that impact income and compare like to like, that black people make more than white people. The income gap reverses.
I don't know why
What
we're
things are you
talking about
controlling
that
for to
now.
get that?
Hold on. That's not even relevant. We're talking about whether or not black people are benefiting from affirmative action. That's what we're talking about right now.
So on that note, then, when we talk about, like, if you have a black person and a white person who are applying to colleges, the white person is likely to have more open slots that are available for them than the black person who is potentially going to be competing with other black people for an affirmative action spot, right? If we're only talking about this subset of black people, again, who are specifically seeking out college admission or expecting college admission based on affirmative action, they're going to have to compete with other people for that as well, and they are going to have less opportunity overall to go to college than any given white person.
I mean, in the end, what we're
They
talking
don't
about is
compete
whether
for
or
a
not
select
people,
number of spots they're only giving to black people.
yeah,
Affirmative action usually has like set numbers of people that they set aside specifically for like not just diversity, but generally like affirmative action
So
programs. Yeah.
racial quotas, like that kind of thing, are not
You can
typically
call
used
it
in
a
American
racial quota.
universities.
Yeah, there's not
because
really
that was
racial
made
quotas
illegal
anymore.
back in the 2000s to explicitly use quotas like that. So that's not what they do anymore.
either way,
We're not talking
again,
about just
the point is that there isn't. You're saying that like for 70 years we've given black people this big advantage and it's just not working. And I'm saying there isn't this big advantage in any area that you look at. There is not some great advantage that they are benefiting from by a majority. Like so far, we have some programs in place that are doing some good things on a small level. Not all of them were great ideas. Some of them were really horrible ideas. And I'd say that probably by majority, affirmative action may have likely even hurt black people in a lot of cases. So I would say that like when we're looking at whether or not we are actually giving them some sort of advantage, I like that would matter a lot. If originally I'm saying you guys can get on board with me to fix systemic racism, and then when it's fixed, we can see whether or not they're able to live in the same society as us. And you said, well, they already have this great advantage that they're not doing much with, so it seems as though we've already fixed it, right? And I'm saying there is no fix. There's no great advantage. They're still kind of in the same place as they were before.
So it seems to me like more what he's saying is that there have been programs in place to benefit them and to give them advantages, which like if you had those same programs in place for whites, the whites would have an advantage over them based on those policies.
We do. That's what I said. That's what I said. We do. White people
If
are
you had
benefiting
affirmative
more
action
from
for
affirmative.
whites,
We
whites
do.
would be taking
Mio,
advantage of it.
Mio,
The United States has been
we
a
just said
project of
this.
affirmative action
Hold
for
on,
white
we
people.
just said this. White people benefit from affirmative action more than anybody else. Okay, we've already gone over this.
Okay.
Yeah, white women benefit.
No, that's something you've said repeatedly.
White women,
Yeah,
yes.
right. So
you disagree with
I
that?
can. If you disagree with that, I thought this was well known, but I can.
Okay, great. Yeah, so not white men. If you,
again,
so I'll put it this way: if you had affirmative action for white men, they would be benefiting from it. You wouldn't have to do mental gymnastics to make arguments for why it didn't work out for white people, that when they have the same scores as everybody else, they get chosen instead, and how that's just not working out for them anyway. You wouldn't have to come up with all these excuses and arguments for that. It would just be benefiting us, okay? And so it's like that's one argument we're making. Now, again, to answer you what your statement here about how we should just get on board with combating racism or whatever, so that and if that doesn't work out, then you'll get on board with us. Well, you know what? I would have agreed with you if we had the time to play out your experiment and there wasn't, before they take political power from us in this country, and if it wasn't for all of this dangerous anti-white rhetoric going on, like people advocating openly for white genocide in universities and online, increasingly so on an insane level. If all of that stuff wasn't happening, and again, it's happening because people like you are denying facts about reality and want to blame whites for why these people are not well off.
We haven't blamed whites. Stop
The
saying that.
exact
Stop
opposite.
going
In
back
fact,
to this.
You have this victim complex. You want us to be
you
blaming whites, but we're
absolutely
not.
have.
We never
I mean,
have.
I could go back and make clips after this of a
You
compilation
can, and you
of
won't find
Radical
any of us
Coder
blaming
saying that
whites.
whites are
You're blaming
keeping
whites.
blacks down. Whites are oppressing blacks. Whites have done. He actually said earlier in this
People who
exact
were white.
conversation that the story of American history is, and this is like a direct quote here, the story of American history is blacks earning something for themselves and whites getting scared of it and tearing them down.
Okay, I got you.
So,
I got
so
you.
what
Do
does
you
it
deny that
sound
this
like
happened
to you?
over and over throughout
Hold
American
on,
history?
hold on.
Do you deny that that happened over and
Okay,
over?
so
in
you
American
are
Radical
history?
saying
Coder.
that.
Hold on.
So you are
The
saying that
story
you
of
were just
American
history.
gaslighting me
Guys,
for the past
listen.
20 seconds.
Real
Oh
quick,
my God,
we can
dude.
fix this real quick. All right, like Radical
I very
Coder,
much
Ryan,
that, but-
do you think that like the white people were doing this to black people because they are white?
It doesn't matter why.
Shut up, Mayo.
I don't know why.
He asked me, Mayo, is your name Ryan? Is your name Ryan?
Your question is,
Mayo,
is that
your name
happening
Ryan?
because they're white? It doesn't matter.
Okay, my name is Ryan, so I think he was talking to me. Tom, can you ask me your question again? I'm sorry,
Yes.
Mio was just
Do
screaming.
you think that they had these advantages because they were white, not because like a systemic system advantages white people, but like on an essential level?
Yeah. So the reason that it's kind of a difficult answer is because I think that the whiteness was the system by which they did these things. I think that the creation of race is how these things were implemented. So I would say that it was the institution of whiteness that gave them the ability to do these things. It wasn't their whiteness or their white skin or anything inherent about being a person who has white skin.
Okay, so they got the advantages because they were white, but they didn't do it because they are white. Okay, so Mio, like
they just did it by virtue of the fact of being white, which is enough in itself, right?
Well, this is why I think the conversation should be like really in depth about what the concept of white is and why it's different from black. And again, why when we talk about mixed race people, they are not considered white despite having white lineage just like other people who are white.
Yeah, like this is a hard conversation to have because when we talk about what it means to be white, normally what we're doing is differentiating ourselves from everybody else instead of saying this is what makes us white. Whereas when we talk about a black person or a Latino person, we're talking about what it is that makes them that group. But with white people, we're more so saying this is what differentiates us from everybody else, or this is what separates us from everybody else.
No, it's the same thing. When they're saying, what is it that makes us black? They're holding themselves distinct from everyone else who's not that group. That's exactly the same thing. They're differentiating themselves. When they say, what is it that makes us black? What is it that makes us a group which is distinct from all the other groups? They're finding things that they have in common with each other that no other groups of people have with them. So no, it is the exact same thing when they say what makes us black as when we say what makes us white.
No, we're categorizing them, whereas with white people, we're not categorizing them, we're distinguishing them.
Yeah,
what do you mean by the word categorize?
People talk about whiteness as almost an absence of race because of this. Like it's assumed to be the default. It's assumed to be neutral, but it's not. It's no different inherently than any other skin color. You know, like it's just
so they're distinct and differentiated from us, but we're not distinct and differentiated from them.
No, we are distinct and differentiated. What I'm saying is that that's not how we define it. We don't define what is black by differentiating. We define what is black by what they actually are, whereas we define white by what we are not. And if you'd like to, you can define white right now, and we can put this on display if you'd like. That would be simpler probably.
Sure, white, let's call Western European descendant people who have shared DNA going back from the Indo-European migrations. Am I saying what I'm not, Tom?
Well, you kind of threw Slavs under the bus there.
Joel, so, there's a big nuanced conversation to have about that, okay? I mean, I have some Slavic friends where we're kind of, all right, you know what? We'll let the Eastern Europeans into, at least for now, and we can sort it out after everybody else is held distinct and beautiful as people of color.
And so when you say that, you're only talking about the way that we would define this now, not the way that we've separated white people throughout history, right?
Well, it started out that, again, all of these people they do have shared ancestry and genetics and all of that stuff. Mm-hmm. However, when you're talking about the word white, not just talking about the concept which I just described, which all of these groups have in common, which is objective reality and true and fact, if you just want to make it about the word or the concept of white, it was Anglos that started this country, which considered themselves white and didn't consider Spaniards or whatever white. And it's then they realized that once they interacted with all the rest of the peoples of the world, hey, we have more in common with our shared ancestry, European, other kingdoms and civilizations than we thought. And so, you know what? We'll call them white too.
So what is it? But that's the point though, is what is it that we shared with them?
White race, that's what it is.
That's my question though. It's
So
not
again, it's
white
like
race,
your
but the
European
white
ancestry.
culture.
You're trying to drag me into the weeds on like, but
I'm not.
Anglos didn't consider Irish white or whatever. But your first claim
No,
was
whiteness
that I
is
couldn't
white
define
culture,
what white
right?
is without saying what we're not.
No.
I'm not saying what we're not. I'm saying
I'm
what
sorry.
we are.
I'm sorry. Maybe I like didn't explain this well enough. But whiteness is like what we would call white culture. It's like excluding others to define ourselves. And so I don't mean just like the fact of like having white
That's
skin.
what black is too.
I
It's
know,
excluding others to define yourself. By defining yourself, you are excluding everyone who doesn't
I
have that
agree
in
with
common
that,
with
but that's
you.
not the you're saying that
It's a very one-dimensional
categorization.
view.
Yeah, you're saying that categorization does exclude, and I completely agree with this. What I'm
Okay.
saying is that there are things that we can point to with black people to say this is what makes them black or to have black American culture. Whereas with white Americans, I don't think we can point at specific things and say this is white American culture, right? Because normally we're going to share those things with everybody else.
Right. I mean, here we are back again as that white people have no culture. Yeah.
No, I'm not saying that. I'm not saying that at all.
Could,
I'm
but
not
we
saying
don't
that.
conceive of them that way.
No,
I mean, just as at a statistical level, yeah, you could analyze a bunch of cultural behavior and predict with a high level of accuracy whether or not someone's a white American. But it's not. But yeah, we don't because white Americans don't have much of an ethnic identity, right? They don't conceptualize the things that they tend to do more than other groups as white identity. And it'd be silly things, right? It'd be like, oh, if you order a fancy kind of latte at Starbucks, right? The probability that you're a white American goes up a certain percent. You can make a long list of these things, and you could do that if you wanted to. But what does this? I don't see what this has to. What point are you trying to make with the fact that white Americans don't think of their own behaviors?
Yeah, well, Miyo, I want to ask you a question that I think maybe shed some light on what Tom was, I think, maybe trying to get at. So, do you consider? Do you think Obama was a white president as well as a black president?
I mean, in that he was president of a country that had white
No.
people in it.
I'm asking about him. Yeah. So, so he's half white
he's
and half
mixed.
black, right?
Oh,
half
I
white,
see.
half black, right?
This is just a fact.
So would you say that Obama is white?
No, I wouldn't say that
Why?
he's white. I would say
Would you
that
say
he
black?
is mixed race at best, and everyone
You think
called
he
him
has
black
do you think
for
maybe
my
he has
entire
intersectional identities?
lifetime. Why are you gaslighting me right now? He was the
Well,
first black
no,
president.
you're right.
That's what everyone has said. They called
I
it
know.
transformational.
Nobody's
agree with you.
gaslighting you,
It was
dude.
like-
He
I agree with
didn't
you, Miyo.
disagree with you, bro. Chill.
I agree
Okay.
with you. Okay. Now, why? Why is he considered a black president but not a white president? Why is that?
Man, because
It's a
he's
hard question,
first
right?
of all
It's a lot to
because
engage
he's
with.
black. Second of all, okay,
Wait,
here's
I mean,
one
it's-
thing.
To
Damn.
say
Here's
he
what
is
happens.
black,
When you
that's
mix-
why we call
when you
him
mix
black.
White people, when you mix, so it comes down to phenotypes in a major way, but it comes down to genetics on a more base level. When you mix white genes with non-white genes, the non-white genes take over in
So you're
phenotype
saying
and
that
in
white
other
genes are
areas.
weaker?
Well, no, it's a trait which is called recessive, which means that
Yeah,
when mixed
weaker.
with other things, they don't take precedent. They don't present themselves. And
So
actually,
what genes? Hang on, Miyo. Are you specifically talking about the genes that make people have white skin? That's what you're talking about?
well, having white skin is a phenotype, which again is one way which genes express themselves physically. The genotype is one more what I'm talking about. Do you
Okay,
know
so
what
what else is being
genotype is?
overridden? What else is being overridden besides the phenotypic expression?
Well, I'm not a geneticist, so I couldn't name the specific gene
Well,
expressions
it just
and all of
seems
that.
to me
But-
that if a person has a black parent and a white parent, that they're just as much black as they are white.
Yeah, no, what I'm describing to you
Using
why
the
that's
definitions
not the
that you
case.
provided throughout this debate.
I'm describing to you why that's not the case. I mean, again, it's like
Okay.
there are genotypical, and phenotypical expressions, which people like the phenotypes that come from the genotypes, right? That people have, and when a white genotype is mixed with a non-white or Western European descendant, whatever you want to call it, genotype is mixed with a non-Western European descendant genotype, the non-Western European descendant phenotype and genotype, it takes over in many different ways, all throughout like their genetic code. And so it's like
so this racial napkin science is exactly why Alabama voted to legalize interracial marriage in a 60%, excuse me. So that means 40% of people in Alabama voted against interracial marriage in the year 2000. It's because of this kind of perception of race.
Well, no,
when you make this justification.
When you make blue
desperate,
eyes and brown eyes, dude, you get brown eyes. That's just what happens. When you mix blonde hair and brown hair, you get brown hair. When you mix straight hair and curly hair, you get curly hair.
You're agreeing with us, though,
these are just objective facts.
You're
You look at
agreeing with
Obama's facial structure, which again is not just skin color, it's his bone structure.
Yes, you're
in his
making
face.
our point.
The black phenotype takes over.
Yes, I'm sorry. You keep explaining things much farther than necessary. Like, we agree with you on these things. That's kind of the point.
It seems
is
like
that
Coder's getting triggered
no,
by
the
this
issue is
expression.
that you are using two different arguments at the same time, where you're saying it's about the way he looks and it's about his genetics. Like, the
way he looks is driven by his genetics.
Yes, we agree with that. No, we agree with that. We've already said that. We agree with that. But if we're going to start essentializing things based on race, you're only talking about genetics. You're not talking about the way they look. Whereas we only care about the way that they look and the way that they are perceived within society.
You're saying that you understand that the way that someone looks is driven by their genetics, how phenotype comes downstream from genotype. But then you're saying that if I talk about how people's genotypes are different, then I'm ignoring the way that they look. No, I'm looking at the cause of the way that they look.
Okay, do you think that it's possible for somebody to be half white and half black but come out looking just white?
It is possible. Yes.
Okay, so
it's
that's
very
kind of
unlikely.
yes, that's the point. Yeah, you're correct. It's very unlikely, but that is the point. Is that if you're just looking at genetics, you would say all of these people are probably black in the way that we would perceive them within society. But we're saying like we don't know just based on genetics alone. We can't say that like they are going to look black or look white. We have to actually look at the person to know for sure.
So the degree of concordance between someone's genetically sort of assigned via some kind of algorithm race and their self-identified race is somewhere in the range of 98, 99%. That's true in a country of 300 million people. That means there's a fairly large number of people for whom that concordance is not there. But this is a very small minority of people, and I'm not sure what relevance this has to the overarching discussion here about the causes of racial inequality and little Timmy and all this sort of thing.
I'm sorry?
Well, I think the relevance was that we were talking about the construction of race. So the reason we talked about mixed race people was because we were talking about why there's a difference, why we don't consider mixed race people as often who are half white to be just as white as they are black.
And again, it comes down to the answer is because
just because they happen to look on average more similar to black people than white people.
So what about the ones so would you say then that the ones who do look more white, they are white then? There's
a difference between what people think someone's race is and what their race just matter. So Obama, just matter of factly, right, is not black or white. He's just half. Like that's the actual fact of the
matter. He's both. That's the whole point, right?
Right.
If by that you mean that his genome, well, if we wanted
he's black
to
because he lives in a society that identifies people who look like him as black people and treats those people a certain way. That's what makes him black.
So this is just a linguistic thing. I think we obviously agree on the facts that most people think of Obama as black, including Obama himself, and his genome is roughly half and half.
Yeah.
We agree on all the actual facts here. So this seems like a silly.
I don't think it's a linguistic thing is because the reason that I frame it that way is because this gives a more accurate version of what actually we're measuring when we talk about race. So you keep talking about all these different genetic factors and stuff, but unfortunately for you, these do not line up along racial lines as far as any current scientist is aware. So
this isn't
you might
about
have this data that you've painted a picture about.
This isn't about him being from Europe.
Is near perfect.
The point is that this isn't about whether or not he's from Europe.
Tons of studies.
Listen, this is about the fact that this isn't about whether or not he's from Europe. This is about what he looks like. That's what this comes down to. Is we treat people and group them based on what they look like.
Is driven by what, man?
But if he's half white, then is he like getting half the treatment of a white person? Like, is that the case? No, it's just the fact that he looks black, that he is treated as a black person. That's what matters.
Yep.
You don't actually care about whether or not
on
he's
average,
half
such
black.
mixed race individuals have IQs directly intermediate between the two races. Crazy how that works, even though they're treated just like black people.
What?
So they might also have other. I mean, there's plenty of explanations for this, right?
Right. That IQ is a heritable trait, for instance.
When you say heritable, what do you think that means?
it means it's inherited on some level.
So do you think wearing earrings is an inherited trait?
There's a heritability of wearing earrings, obviously. I mean, this is a dumb example that comes from Ned Block, who is...
Whatever. Well, can I explain it? The reason I ask this is because it's true that wearing earrings is a 50% heritable trait. Okay, so the reason that's interesting is because it means that you can paint a lot of interesting pictures about what is genetic and predetermined based on saying something is what is IQ, like 30 to 60% heritable is what they found, right? So this isn't as concrete.
We're so far off in the weeds right now. This is Mew's going to have to establish that there's some mind independent of the fact that constitutes race. He is appealing to genetics. Yep.
It's are partly determined by variation in genes. Why is that even interesting?
No, hang on. Do you know why it was 50%?
I'm not sure what you mean by
because women were about 50% of the population, and women were more likely to wear earrings, right?
No, even within women.
So this is a social construction of the people who decide to wear earrings. Oh my God, are you kidding? What, women are like biologically dispositioned?
No. What I'm saying is that even within sex, there's a heritable component to whether or not you wear earrings.
Okay.
Look, this is a biological. It's a biological.
This is done via twin studies.
Well, you're talking about whether or not they have feminine or masculine like traits, right, Sean?
Oh, I don't know specific. I mean, I would get, this is just stuff I'm making up. Like, for instance, I would guess extroversion probably leads to people being more likely to get earrings. A whole bunch of just random stuff.
Here's what it comes down to.
It's like I mean, it's literally called the first law of behavioral genetics, right? That any trait that varies within a population significantly, that variance is going to be due to genes.
Okay, and here's one way to conceptualize this to understand is what Richard Dawkins, he pioneered the idea of memes, which is like not internet memes, but like idea packets which are passed along by genetics. Like for instance, you know, like beavers. Okay, beavers, it's inherited, like whether or not their nose is going to be a certain size or shape or whatever, whether their tail is going to be a certain size or shape. But it's also passed down among beavers the size and shape and the way that they build their dam. Mm-hmm. And it's like that's not something that's built into them. It's not built onto them. It's not something that's a direct physical expression of who they are. It's an idea which is passed down from beaver to beaver in their genes, yes, that they tend to make the same size, shape, and dams in the same ways as their parents did.
Miyo,
well, why is that? It's not attached to them. It's an idea.
We agree with this. The problem
and it's the same thing with whether or not you have the idea to wear earrings or not. Okay.
No, it's not. That's completely different. We're talking about like, do you think? Never mind. I'm not even going down that road. The point is that when you guys talk about the fact that it is genetic, it's a genetic line from Europe that makes somebody white. But then when we show you somebody who has half of their genetic line from Europe, you say no, they're black. This like kind of disproves your entire point. They're not half white. They're just black. That's the point.
And I think really hammering down on that difference between.
What do you think? I mean, again, so the facts are that the genomes are roughly half and half. That people normally use baskets of phenotypes to infer ancestry, and that because of this, they would call Barack Obama black. This in no way invalidates any of the things that have been said.
No, they do. If you're saying that what makes somebody white is the fact that they have Western European lineage, yet this person has half Western European lineage, but he's not half white. He's just black. That does disprove what you're saying. We're not talking about genetics. We're not talking about lineage. We're talking about what they look like, and that is it. Nothing else besides that. We're just talking about what they look like.
So that would disprove what I was saying if what I had said is, hey, the way that I use race is to refer to continental ancestry, and that's also the way that everyone uses it all the time in all contexts. Now, what I've actually said is that the correspondence between genetically inferred continental ancestry and self-identified race is in the range of 98 to 99%, and that in America, this means there's a large number of discordant cases. That's literally what I said. And so the idea that a single discordant case falsifies what I said is silly.
Well, no. When we asked what it is that makes somebody white, the answer that we got is that they come from Western European lineage. That was the answer that we got.
Yes, and Obama, by using that kind of language, is just half and half. I don't see what
Right, but he's
your
not,
difficulty
though.
with this.
Well, you guys already said that he's black. You guys have already said this. He's black.
So I definitely never said he's just considered black, right?
Right, but he is
so
considered
that's our
black.
point.
That's the, like, yes, that is
Yes,
our
and
point.
what do you not get? I agree that there are instances where there's a discrepancy between the genetic ancestry and how people perceive someone's race. And Mio clearly agrees with that. No one disagrees with that. And yet it is also true that in the vast majority of cases, these things are concordant and that this is how race has historically been defined. And yeah, there are weird edge cases. So what?
It's not that there's
So
weird
the reason it's
edge
important to
cases.
talk about, especially in this conversation, is because when we talk about mixed race people, once again, they are growing, like the population of mixed race people in America is growing at a very, very rapid rate, right? So even if we cut off all the immigration, like, which again is bonkers for a lot of different reasons.
I'm trying my best to like let him go for a while so that he can go down a line of questioning, and then me go for a while so I can go down a line of questioning. But I feel like we end up jumping back and forth instead.
Environments to make sure that little Timmy doesn't get bullied for being white or having white ancestors. So this is why we need to talk about the differences and the historic construction between whiteness and blackness, right? We have to have a more accurate view of these things. So the reason that we're diving so deep into the idea of mixed race people is because it elucidates a more complex understanding of these things, and it helps us better understand them.
Okay, so just because there's mulatto kids in America now being white means what to you?
Well, no, we're saying it's just subjective. Like, we can look at somebody like Trump who's completely orange, yet we still call him white, right? Like, it's kind of
most white people are
subjective.
pink.
Yes, it's kind of subjective in what it is that we do or don't call white. And so, in the end, like, this isn't essentialized. This is just
I feel
a
like
social
Sean
construction.
has said this like 3 or 4 times now, that like it's near perfect. The amount of people who, like, what they identify as lines up with their genetic ancestry, and that there's some edge cases here and there, but like
We're not talking about
that's
what they
just-
identify as. We're talking about what other people will identify them
Okay,
as.
and that too.
Yeah,
I'd be interested to see that, but that wouldn't disprove anything we're saying.
yeah, it wouldn't
I
change
mean,
anything.
but again, it's like what's your point here? It's like if
It's that
it's
we
just
agree.
like,
It's that we all agree. We all agree that it's not just about genetics, and it's not essentialized. It is a social construction where we draw lines arbitrarily based on what it is we think is white or what it is that we think is black. So if you look up something
there's
called
different
prototype
ways to
theory,
look and talk
it will
about it.
right. It will. No, that's what we're saying. So like we can agree that like there are different ways to identify these things and different ways to group them, and then we can decide different, like based on those categorizations, who is or isn't white, who is or isn't part of the superior species, who is or isn't going to get, what do you call it? Affirmative action. Like all of these things are kind of subjective in the end, and we just do our best to group people based on what it is we think they are, based on
No,
a social
here's the
construction.
difference. Here's the difference. I can say to you that like I've never seen Todd. Okay, I don't know what Todd looks like.
I've seen
I've
Todd.
never seen his DNA report, so I don't know any of that. And I would bet you money that Todd's black. Okay, and what's that based on? It's like my subjective societal impressions or whatever, right? So
Or maybe because
there's
he has a
that.
black avatar.
Okay, well that's a good indicator as well. But hey, who knows if he's just LARPing, right?
I didn't vote for Joe Biden, so
He ain't black. I'm wrong.
There you go. Yeah, you ain't black
okay.
unless you vote for Joe.
Right. So there's
I
that,
voted
but,
6 times, so I'm super black.
So
me too.
I can like cede that to you. I can totally admit that like there are societal impressions that are based that we base our views of what we think someone's race is off of. But the difference is you people are not willing to acknowledge that there's any biological reality to race at all. And that's why we're unable to have these conversations, is because you're so scared that the people on Twitch will label you race realist, like it's a bad word, it's a mean thing, that you're refusing to acknowledge that there's any genetic aspect to race at all whatsoever. And so so say it right now. There's a genetic
We've already
aspect
said
to what
it.
race is.
We've already said that
Yeah, so
numerous times. We've said that the
So
way
you're
you
a
look
race
is
realist,
based.
Tom?
No.
No,
I think
stop.
race is real.
No,
please, God,
stop,
no, I'm
stop.
not a race
Listen,
realist.
listen.
Don't cancel me.
Well, yeah, go ahead.
After
Go
Tom, I'm
ahead.
gonna talk.
Go ahead, Ryan.
Yeah, I would say race is real in the way that it has real impacts on people based on
No,
No, genetics, man.
yeah, answering the question.
Yeah, but I have a question. Do you think that race and IQ are
That's
are
what
tied?
it means to be a race realist. It means that
but
you're
is
tying
that what you
IQ
guys
to
think?
race.
So do you guys think that?
I think that
So
yes.
if we break up the data, I mean, it does seem to be the case that Black people on average have lower IQs. Also, by the way, this tends to, there's an effect called, what's it called? I don't remember, but there's a name for it where Black people who are reminded about like IQ disparities actually perform less or perform worse on IQ tests right before they take them. And women also have a similar effect if they're reminded that women perform worse on certain kinds of tests and stuff.
So you guys are race realists then, right?
No.
Hey, I'm
No,
gonna
hold on.
I'm gonna go tell a bunch of
There's a
blacks
big
and women
difference.
about IQ
There's a big
tests
difference.
real quick.
Let me say the distinction.
Thank you for telling me that, Coder. I'm gonna tell as many of them as I can.
You guys are
Yeah, I know
being
you are. I know
insanely
you
bad
are.
faith right
So-
now. Let him finish, please.
All right.
Yeah, so to bring it together, the distinction between us and a race realist is that race realists believe that these IQ average differences are intrinsic to people because of their race. This is the realism of the race that they are ascribing. I don't agree with this. I believe that something like IQ is a lot more malleable than that, and also that having access to good education, good resources, good parents, good environment around you is going to have a
Well,
benefit.
let me add one thing
wait,
onto
hold
that
on
real
really
quick, please. Just let
Why
me add
did
one
you- why
thing,
did you-
please,
no,
please,
shut
please,
up.
please, please.
No, let me just say it.
I put just real
Let me
quick.
do it. I want to do it.
It's a so
Oh, no.
the
Fine,
difference
go.
is that we call race
Yo,
a
hold
social
on.
construction,
Don't
right?
talk over.
That's the bigger difference, though, is that we would say that race is a social construction, not just genetics. But go ahead, Brittany.
Okay.
What were
So
you gonna ask?
like my question is gonna be, why do like Jews and Asians have a much higher IQ than maybe like whites who probably, I don't know how much higher, but
So
it's
Yeah,
if
go
I
ahead.
can
You
answer
actually,
this
I think
one,
you have a better answer.
I would say that like there is a socioeconomic factor on these as well as genetics, and that it's not just one or the other. We have to take both into account. And socioeconomic factors over time can affect genetics. So like we can't just say like it's only one or it's just the other. If we look at a group of people who have been oppressed over a long period of time, it is likely that they would have a lower IQ over that long period of time. And if
that's why Jews have such low IQs.
no, and if Jews actually have,
Are you saying they weren't oppressed historically?
well, no, they were oppressed in some
Not all
ways,
oppression
but
is
They're like
in
the
other
record
ways,
holders. I don't know, man. They must be idiots.
in some ways they were oppressed, but in other ways they were actually given a lot of advantages, like by the Catholic Church, where they were given, advantages with banking and loaning and stuff like that, to where they would end up disproportionately in the top 1% when it comes to. When it comes to wealth in America, like that is like a big reason as to why they would have.
Would you say that with Jews, their benefits from white people outweigh their historical oppressions, and that's why their IQs are higher on average than
I don't
whites?
think you could ever say it's one or the other. Like, I think that even white people have some sorts of oppression that we would want to look at, and we can't just say like, oh, well, they get a lot of advantages, therefore all of the other oppressions that they suffer don't matter anymore. That's not how things work.
But you would say that, like, with blacks, you'd say that their oppressions outweigh any benefits that they got.
I only want to fix the specific types of oppressions that they have endured, not just say, well, blanket statement, they were oppressed, therefore they get everything, right? Like, we only want to fix the specific things that they were.
If you had two buttons in front of you, and I said, who wants to win $1 million? Where are blacks, which is greater, their oppression or their advantages from whites historically? Which one would you press?
Wait, say that again?
You have two buttons in front of you. Are their oppressions or their advantages given to them from whites greater? Which one?
I don't know why you have to keep saying from whites. I don't.
Like, whatever whites have done to blacks, have they benefited them more or oppressed them more? Which one?
I don't know. I wouldn't press either one of those buttons.
I refuse to answer the question. It's just like,
well, no,
man,
it's like me
whenever I bring
asking
up
you.
buttons,
Hey,
these people have no answers.
It's like me asking you, Miyo, is your poop orange or purple?
Yeah, right.
Like,
that's exactly.
There's not
the
a
same.
right answer to this.
Well, no, there's not a right answer for you. That's for sure. So I just wanted to clear.
What do you think
up,
the right
that's all
answer is?
beside
Yep.
the point.
Yeah, like which one would you press?
Well, I mean, I would say that overall the benefits that whites have visited upon blacks probably outweigh the negatives. And I mean today, the ones who are alive right now, obviously, you know, the ones who were like living under slavery, I would probably give a different answer.
Okay.
If I was living under chattel slavery in America,
real quick.
I would probably rather, if I was an American black, I'd rather live back home, honestly.
You don't have to
Take
keep explaining
my
when we
with the
agree.
warlords and machetes or whatever. But you know, right now, the ones who are alive today, I would say that they're probably like their benefits outweigh, because I wouldn't want to rather live in Africa.
Mio, you don't have to keep explaining when we agree, okay? So would you say then that like black people do poorly because they're too stupid? Like if they have so many advantages that they're still doing poorly in America, is it because they're too stupid to do well?
Well,
That's what the whole idea is.
So Sean does agree with that.
Saying it, but obviously,
I don't think that's the case.
I feel like that.
And
Yeah.
their average IQ is 85, man. You know, if you have an IQ of 83 or less, the Army said that you can't be trained to do anything that isn't positively counterproductive, right? That's half of them, dude.
I'm sorry, but
That's
like the
half of
point
them.
is that
Too
you guys.
stupid to do literally
It's not
anything.
how, first of all, it's not how averages
That
work.
the Army
Average doesn't
said
mean that
that,
half
not
people are
me.
under it.
Yeah, the point is that like
Well, it
one,
does
you
if it's
guys
a normal
can't
distribution.
demonstrate in any way that they've had so many advantages from being black that they like can't overcome the oppressions on top of that. Like you can't demonstrate that in any way. That we
Well, I
could
didn't mean it
demonstrate
like
that they
I
have
just
so
meant
many
which was
oppressions
greater,
that the
historical
advantages
oppression
don't
or
help them.
historical advantages. And I would say that, like, you know, the blacks who are living in the white countries are like the advantages outweigh the historical oppressions. And
So
and
this
I was
question
gonna-
just kind of derails the whole conversation, because the real conversation should be about how the intersection of occasional benefits and a lot of oppression led to the situation that Black Americans are currently in today, which is what we're talking about in terms of how the future of that will impact little Timmy, right?
Oh yeah,
So it
of
doesn't
course.
really matter.
I was just using blacks as an example to see if Tom would answer my button question about Jews, but he doesn't like any of them, and I understand why.
Because there's not a right answer there.
It's not for you, that's for sure, because you'll get canceled no matter what you say.
Wait, what do you think my answer would be?
Well, I mean, so you were saying that the IQs of people are, you know, based on whether they get benefits or oppression, and like what their status and role in society is, and that's why blacks' IQs are so low is like a big reason is because they've endured, oppression, and so like they if only they had more benefits, then their IQs would rise more. And so Brittany brought up Jews and said, well, they have higher IQs than whites even. So what are they like benefited a lot by whites? Are they? And you said, yeah, there's a lot of ways the Catholic Church has totally benefited them and brought them up in society, made them the top 1%. And so I was just, last I heard, Jews were the most discriminated against people in the history of the damn planet. So I was just confused. Like, are they benefited more or oppressed more? They seem like Schrodinger's oppressed, benefited humans.
Yeah, it's a false dichotomy, though. Like, you can't just say they are oppressed more or they were, advantaged more, just the same as you can't say that with white people. Like that's a false dichotomy. The point is
you
that
can't say it with whites because they're the ones doing it to everybody, right?
No, I never said that. What my point is that there are socioeconomic things that come into play, but there are also genetic things that come into play. There are like societal standards, there are laws, there's like all sorts of things that you have to look at, and to just say are they oppressed or not oppressed, like which one's bigger, which one's greater, that's a complete false dichotomy. Like we can still look at Jews and say they ended up in the top 1%, but nobody's going to deny the oppression that they went through. Like that would be ridiculous, right?
Some people will.
But they still ended up with socioeconomic benefit. So that it's not just oppression; it's socioeconomic.
So who do you think white people oppressed more, blacks or Jews?
This is a dumb question, dude. I don't know.
Why? Because the oppression is why blacks have a low IQ, right? But Jews have a higher IQ.
The reason it's a dumb question is because you keep asking like who was hurt by whites, but something I made very clear earlier is that the problem with systemic racism is that even if we removed all of the white people by some even we genocided all the fucking white people, then these systems, if we didn't remove these systems or alter these systems, then there would still be disparate outcomes based on these systems. Right. So it's not about white suppressing people. It's about people who were white, sure, who use the benefits that they gained from having a network of whiteness that they've created over generations. Like we're talking about how they use that to do things.
If you killed all the whites,
it's not about them being white.
The end result is still a redistribution of power and resources from white people to non-white people.
Not just from white people. We talked about this earlier, how if we're taxing people for reparations, black people are paying for it, immigrants are paying
redistribution.
For it. I mean, yes, white people certainly are most of the country. I agree with you there.
And we're giving it to the minority. It's like I said before.
Not explicitly. I think reparations should be a broad project, a broad multiracial project, to be honest, yeah.
Why would whites deserve reparations?
So when we talk about reparations, I think the form of it should be not just. I think there could be like cash payments and stuff in some contexts, but I think ideally we should be investing broadly in communities that are feeling the impacts of this legacy, right? So it's not just about, hey, do you look black enough to get reparations? No, it's hey, what is your situation and why is this why would we consider this situation to be downstream from the mistreatment of Black Americans, right? So we can examine that metric and decide who best would benefit from
again. So
it's regardless of what you happen to think, the fact of the matter is that in the real world, there are a bunch of affirmative action programs which on net are redistributing power from white people to minorities on net. There are also reparation programs being rolled out, proposed or even tried in certain neighborhoods. And what these are doing also is redistributing power and resources from white people to non-white people. And this is all happening at the same time as you see a growing ideology of outright hatred of white people, which is taking over our institutions and interfering with personal interactions all through society. Whether or not you happen to want it to be different is kind of, I think, besides the point of what's actually going to happen to little Timmy. But anyway, there's a little bit of speechy, but that's because I actually also
what's your solution for little Timmy then? What's your solution? Because I think my solution of teaching more and more people about how people are not responsible for the actions of their ancestors is going to help them a lot more than people saying that you are responsible for the actions of your ancestors, which seems to be Miyo's position.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so I have to leave, but just in one sentence, my solution would be for people to come to a correct, objective understanding of the causes of racial differences, and then stop obsessing over comparing each other in terms of those differences.
Yeah. So can I ask you a question real quick? So like to be more clear, just real quick, I promise. Like just to be more clear, you're saying that like we wouldn't want to essentialize race in that way and make people pay for the failures of their fathers, right?
Pay for the failures of their fathers?
Yeah, like pay for the sins of their fathers. Like white people shouldn't have to pay for our ancestors enslaving black people, just as like Jews shouldn't have to, or Nazis or German or South Africans or anybody.
Yeah, but the reason for that is because those past actions are not actually why black people are poor. That's the reason why I think that.
Okay.
That's what you think, yeah. But thankfully, we have a whole lot of history, a whole lot of evidence, like literally all of American history that tells us a very different story. So have a good night, Sean.
Anyway, yeah, thanks for having me out.
Ed, thanks for showing up, man.
Yeah, Brittany, do you want me to jump out as well so that you're muted?
Well, we can all just stick around and do some Q&A if you
want.
You're
muted, Brittany. You're still muted.
Son of a
bitch! Man?
Keep her quiet.
Don't you know how we feel about women in politics, Tom?
God,
you want me to jump out to make it even real quick?
Weren't you enjoying it?
You're fine. You're good. You can stay.
Okay.
We can just do like Q&As and hang out.
Yeah, that's what I was like saying in the mic that nobody was hearing, and I didn't say bye to Sean because I was muted. So bye, Sean.
She didn't say bye. I was watching her. Her mouth didn't move at all. She didn't say goodbye. She didn't care that he was leaving.
She was incredibly rude to Sean when he was leaving.
What kind of host?
Never coming back. Okay, so from Storm, this is like way earlier in the night. We have a lot of these. So what is Miyo's thoughts on the weak neoconservative rebuttal to CRT saying it's actually anti-everyone and to say it's anti-white is white supremacy?
Yeah, it's absurd. I mean, it's like the same argument that like you hear from Coder here, that like, well, actually affirmative action is bad for black people and that's why it's bad. It's like affirmative action has cost so many white men opportunities that they've been the most qualified for. It's a crying shame. And these people will talk about how it's like hasn't actually benefited the people that it's targeted at helping. And by buying into that frame at all, that we should be helping those people at the expense of white males who have earned their place legitimately and are the most qualified for their roles that they're going for. It's like we're costing those people, and it's wrong, and it's bad to do that to them. And it's just another example of people paying for the sins of their fathers. And what's more than that is this is the reason why our society is going to fail. When you have people who are maybe just qualified enough, even they pass the bar, but they're not the most qualified, making it into every single field in all of these different places, you're going to start seeing planes fall out of the sky eventually. Clip that.
Okay. Next one is from Vosh Fan. Everyone in prison is poor and it's majority black. Does that group try to make friends with the Mexicans, white nationalists, etc., and hold hands?
I mean, I would say probably, and there are plenty of groups that are in prison that are not necessarily split up among those lines, but of course there do exist groups that have established themselves on those lines. So that of course is a real thing in prisons.
Yeah, I've been to prison a couple of times. Things were not split up among racial lines. So I'm not saying that there aren't prisons where that exists, just saying like that's not like an objective thing.
Why am I not surprised? I knew Tom was a hardcore guy.
Yeah. All right. So from Jeremy Creason, Mio, have you read Ron Unz's UNZS? I don't know what that is. Myth of an American meritocracy. Non-Jewish whites are the least represented according to merit.
No, but I wouldn't be surprised. That sounds like an interesting read. I'll come back and check this out on the playback and write that down.
Okay.
Thanks for that.
From Vosh Fan, low IQ people harm high IQ people. Warlord Roz took over Chaz with guns on day one. Crabs in a bucket. We made property rights, etc. to protect you. What the fuck is Vosh Fan? Are you drunk when you're writing this? It's a mess.
It's all of his comments on my video were all don't really make any sense.
But this one, like some of them make sense, but this one is all over the place. Elon from, I mean, it's a total mess.
I was just going to respond real quick to a question I saw a couple of times in chat. I do teach front end development. I've focused on front end development recently, but I consider myself a language agnostic full stack developer. So I don't really only make things for web development. I don't only make things for desktop programs. You know, I like coding. I understand programming, and I like teaching it across all platforms.
Yeah. Do you know Go?
I'm familiar with Go, the basics of Go. I like it a lot. It's a cool language.
Cool. I might drop in sometime and learn something.
Eric Pony said, "Why are we still focused on a class called white? White is artificial."
So it's not a class called white. I mean, I suppose like in a way it's a classification. And so if you want to call it a class because it's some sort of categorization.
Cast is better. CASTE, casting systems. So like a way of categorizing people based on their where they belong in a social hierarchy, right? So this is kind of how race is constructed.
Systems.
Yeah.
Just caste. Race is a caste system in that it deems where people should be in a social hierarchy based on some perceived idea of them.
Right. So like the race, that hierarchy depends on a socioeconomic system that we put into place kind of arbitrarily.
Yeah, so dude says white is artificial. I would question him, is black real? Or is it only whites that are artificial?
It's all of them that are artificial.
They're real. They're both real in the way they impact people in very different ways.
Yeah, and they are objective things that we can see, but we can't draw objective lines around them. So we can't say, like, this is where somebody cuts off from being black to being white. If we start off with a black person and they keep mating with a white person over and over and over, we can't, like, draw a line to say this is when they stop being black and start being white. It's if you look up if you guys don't know who Silly Serious is, she's a woman who does philosophy on Twitch. Very bright woman. She's taught me.
A woman that does philosophy.
X for doubt.
She taught me about a thing called prototype theory that's helped me a lot when it comes to understanding, like, social norms and things like that. And so if we have, like, a prototype in our minds, the closer something is to that prototype, the more likely we are to associate it with that thing. So, like, when it comes to, like, what a woman is, we're looking for, like, long hair, a dress, makeup, you know, certain facial features, things like that.
Plato's idea of forms?
It is like forms, but it's a newer version of forms that I believe Aristotle came up with.
Oh, okay. A woman that does philosophy.
She's very good at it too.
There's so many of them, man. You'd be surprised. You should talk to women more. I know it might be hard for you, but
yeah, right. I'll never talk to women.
G Sneed, anytime, buddy. Come hit me up anytime, bro. I will be happy to make you look just as dumb as anybody else up here.
From AJ said, when either of y'all post the explanation for racial differences, why does your position have a larger provable explanatory variance to both sides?
Well, we're not denying what it is that they're saying. And that's kind of the point that we keep having to go over. It's like, if you understand logic, you have to have some sort of premise, conclusion, right? We're not denying their conclusion. Their conclusion can even be part of our premises to come to our conclusion. So their entire idea can exist and does exist within our reality. Whereas our conclusion does not exist within their reality. That is not part. So they completely discount everything that we say, while still coming to the same conclusion. So their premises aren't discounted. Their conclusion isn't discounted. It's just that we can add that into our conclusion as well, and it wouldn't change anything.
Okay.
Just let her keep talking. She's not gonna realize.
Repeal the 19th.
So true.
Oh, by the way, I wanted to extend a slight olive branch. I actually, when I was rewatching your debate with Destiny, I actually kind of agreed with the criticisms that came up a lot after that, where we talked about how, like, he really, in a lot of ways, wasn't engaging. He was challenging you on things that, like, didn't really matter. Like, I believe that you're a computer science student, you know? Like, I don't think that, like, whether or not someone can describe what a Turing complete language is at the drop of a dime necessarily, like, tells us whether or not they studied computer science. I believe that you were paid to make or to do music or perform music, but I think
I was like 17.
Yeah, and I figured something like that too. But I thought it was not useful the way he was pushing you on those things specifically, when, to be fair, you were saying a bunch of other outrageous shit.
Did you
recognize that he did that on purpose?
Yeah, did you see that they posted clips of me pretty much saying the same thing on Twitter, saying, like, I agree with Destiny's, Brittany, you're muted. I agree with Destiny's conclusions, but, like, overall, like, he didn't seem to actually be engaging with a lot of what Miyo was saying.
Yeah, and just
No, I didn't mute you.
And just so you all know, like, I mean, I just to recognize, I think you do know that Destiny is not a stupid guy. He was doing that on purpose. Mm-hmm. And it's like he just didn't have any intention of engaging with the argument, and he was being dishonest from the start. It's like what he wanted to do is something like character assassination rather than, like, engage with arguments. And so,
well, to be fair, you weren't engaging with him in good faith, and at some point he decided he was going to stop engaging in good faith. Like, that's...
maybe that's the case. I thought he was asking ridiculous questions, and so I just took my turn to talk and kept going. So, okay, fair enough.
I gotta address this real quick because I think this is Zeke. Mio's not the one who brought it up. Somebody else brought it up. So, like, he's not still bitching about anything. All right, we're gonna move on to the questions. From Vosh Fan, can hate? Am I muted, you guys?
No, you're here.
Okay.
Unfortunately.
Are you sure you didn't mute me, Todd? Because I didn't.
I swear I would never do that.
Okay. I'm not sure I buy that. All right. So Bosch Fan says, can't hate a crying baby. It can't control its impulses. If blacks are capable of self-control and choose crime, we can only conclude they're bad people.
This is kind of like. Sorry, go ahead.
No, well, I was just going to say that, like, when we talk about like what's criminalized at a certain point in time, there's actually an entire field of study that, or maybe not field of study, but there's an entire like line of thinking that examines the idea of criminalizing race. So this is kind of the way that historically throughout America that Black people have been not necessarily always put in situations where they're more likely to do criminal activity, but rather the things that they were doing would then be viewed as more criminal. So like this is even things like loitering, for example, were started to keep Black people away from certain like property and stuff. I think I kind of lost what I was initially starting point, the initial starting point, but that's
Yeah, I would say that I think that everybody would say, like, if I asked anybody, 100% of people would say, yeah, I want to be a millionaire. If I was like, hey, do you want to be a millionaire? Everybody would be like, yeah, I want to be a millionaire. But if I get a question like that, my question would be, why aren't you a millionaire? Like the question that you're asking right now, why don't they just control their outcomes? Why aren't you a millionaire then? Why haven't you controlled all of your outcomes? Why aren't you a billionaire? Like, why can't you just do everything that you want to do? We can't, like, I'm not going to pretend as though people don't make their own decisions, because they do. But you make the decisions that you have within the options that are given to you. You can't just choose to do anything you want at all times. And sometimes, if you're put into circumstances where committing crimes are your best option, then that, or even like the most likely option, doesn't even have to be the best option, but it is the most likely option, then like it's not as though they don't need to be held accountable for those things, because they did still make the decision to commit those crimes. So they still get held accountable the same way as anybody else. But we can also look at the factors that would push them to be more likely to commit crimes and try to fix those circumstances.
Okay. From Dragon Ice Lake of Fire, who is apparently not a bot, critical race theory is forced equal outcomes. Okay.
That is not what critical race theory is.
So true, King.
Vosh Fan again. Environment is an expression of genetics, and crime causes poverty, not the other way around. No cops here right now, unless I commit a crime.
So true.
So when we talk, I think Tom might have hit on this. Like, I mean, people are so one way to view like why like drug crime and stuff like happens a lot in like a lot of low income communities. We can examine like why they might see economic opportunity in criminal activity that they don't have in other areas of life due to the results of systemic racism, right?
What? Okay.
I'm just saying that like people are put in situations that incentivize them to make certain choices. That's all.
Okay. From Bosch Fan, and thanks for all the super chats. 2 islands, one full of under 80 IQ hicks, one full of Elon Musks. Which island does better? Works together, shares info, maintains tech, resolves stuff verbally. I mean, his questions are all over the place. Okay. Let's see here. What else do we have from maybe some other people? Oh, fuck, I should have asked this one when Sean was here. But from Brandon Mex, if things are going to get so bad for people like Miyo, maybe he could look to relocate to a different country.
Yeah, that's actually something that a lot of people like me are considering in the near future. And not only for that reason, but because the scary reality of the vaccine talk here in America, it's not looking good. And so if something like secession is not going to be on the table, given that all the elections are going to be fake from now on for the rest of our lives, then yeah, it's going to be, moved to a sort of last stand country for our people on Earth, and that'll be fun. We'll have a great time.
Okay. From Chase Mitchell, Mio, would you ever date a black person? Tom, would you ever date a white?
This is a stalker of mine. This is a guy who is constantly trying to get in my pants. But
Nice.
I suppose, Chase Mitchell, if you were the white man, then I maybe I suppose we'll have to find out.
Clip it.
Yeah, would I ever date a black girl? Didn't you hear that Mio has a black girlfriend?
He has a black girlfriend.
It's so well known on these parts.
She's got a Twitter page. Go follow her.
I was hoping to at one point find a good opportunity to mention this, but I think that I'm doing more to push the white race forward by being in like a monogamous relationship with a white woman. What are you doing, Mio? Like, what are you doing to make sure that the white birth rate increases? Who are you? You should be like spreading your seed, right?
Yeah, me and Brittany are planning on saving the white race by ourselves, dude. What are you doing?
Right. See? So everyone's got a plan, but you, man.
Yeah, no way, not me. I'm incel forever, for life. I hate women, and I'm never talking to them. And yeah, I'm
Half
never.
White people are women.
Ever. No
you
way.
hate 50% of white people.
Get away from me, women. Especially white girls.
All right, let's see here. From Elronder, can Radical Coder please say the sentence? If all the fucking white people.
So I said even if that happened, the point was that I mean we can imagine crazy hypotheticals where I say all the fucking black people are died, or if all the fucking Jewish people are dead, and still imagine like what the follow would be like, right? Like I don't think that's necessarily a
I agree with
Flip
that.
it, boys.
Go ahead. I don't have a fan base. Like you guys are my fan base right now.
We love you, Coder.
Yeah, I'm your biggest fan.
From Zen Shapiro, question for both. Does America have a unified social culture? If yes, what is it? If not, why not? Oh, God, the culture question getting really...
Yeah, no, America doesn't have a unified social culture. It's many different ethnic identities all thrown in together. And that's sort of what I got at earlier, is when somebody asked, like, what brings a nation together?
That was me.
And it's a common identity, a shared identity, a shared history, story, language, religion.
Yeah, language
culture.
is the thing that... Am I muted? Okay.
Language is a big one. It's a really big one.
The number one thing.
Yeah, if you can't communicate with each other like effectively, what do you even have at that point? And so yeah, it's really it's tough at this point. And honestly, I don't see it looking too good for the future of the United States, honestly, bro. So it's concerning.
Well, I think that they should have to, like, it should be a requirement for people that are coming here that they have to learn English. Like this whole
Oh, that's racist. Didn't you hear?
Yeah.
Well, I think aren't citizenship tests like in English already?
And
amnesty.
you can have a Spanish option, I think.
Amnesty doesn't require that.
Sure, but when we're talking about most
Bro, Vosh fan is seriously just like has a ridiculous amount of crazy comments, just over and over, like straw manning everything that I say or misunderstanding literally everything that I say, arguing against things that I didn't say, like just like his comments on my video. It's non-stop conflation and misunderstandings. I don't know if he doesn't speak English very well. Like honestly,
Are you muted to us, or are you talking to your chat?
both. I'm muted and talking to my chat.
Okay, so you're not talking to us. You're not pulling a Brittany, huh?
No.
Lucky you.
No, he's a guy. He knows best.
Shut up. All right, so
Got him.
some more questions.
Also, everyone here, if you get the opportunity, you should learn a little bit of Spanish. It'll make your life richer, and it'll increase your.
We're going the wrong way here.
Nope.
Learn Chinese instead, honestly, because they're going to be the next.
We're not trying to help people here. We want blood sports.
No, everybody should have to learn English, and it should be one world language.
This is a very European-centric view of the globe.
Well, it's not even like most countries speak more than one language. Like, it's not weird.
Languages. I don't get the point of that. What the fuck is the point?
It's helpful to be able to communicate with more than just your country. Like, that seems like you're enclosing yourself.
Communicate with everybody in the world. It should be one language.
Speaking English.
That's fine, but
Yeah,
go ahead.
The problem is that a lot of languages don't just have different words for the same things. A lot of languages have different ways of framing ideas based on the language itself. So when we seek to understand more languages and get a better idea of how every language evolves and bring them together in some context, obviously English is kind of an amalgam of a lot of
I turned
languages,
them down so I could
right?
talk.
So, but we rob ourselves of the rich contextual details that exist within these languages if we try to cut them off and just. Well, I don't know. I think there's a lot of ancient knowledge that exists within these languages that we would be doing ourselves a disservice if we wipe it off the map.
Well, I'm okay with that.
I wasn't talking, so it wasn't important.
One interesting fact is Hungarian is such an inherently gendered language that, like, if you type into like Google Translator, like in Hungarian, these I forget what it is, just their pronouns or whatever. It automatically genders them based on the activity, so it'll change it to like he builds, she cooks, he beats, she
right. Look, I will agree that like everybody in the United States should speak English. Like that.
There it is.
Well, right, but
There it is.
you're
That's
talking
up.
about
Sentence over.
you're
Period.
talking about
Period.
everybody in the
Period.
world. Whereas I as he said, like it's cool to have different ways to express what it is you're saying. There's even words that don't exist within the English language that are in other languages that like we don't even have a way of expressing.
Why is that cool?
Why is it cool to have different ways of expressing yourself?
Yeah.
Why?
Well, I mean, if we're all trying to be able to communicate with each other, why? I mean, shouldn't we all be able to understand each other?
Again, if we all live in the same country, yes. But like, if we're in different countries, it would make sense that different people have the ability.
And all that, then.
Wait, but why should they all have to speak English? Why shouldn't we all have to speak their languages?
Because we're better.
More importantly, we live in a society where we have technological advancements that are at the point where you can literally talk live into a microphone and have your voice automatically translated into another language. I don't think that we're at the point where we need to be removing languages as much as increasing access to tools like this and advancing our technology on tools like this so that more people really can communicate better without necessarily having to erase their culture and their way of expressing themselves.
Okay.
So yeah, I mean, really, the point that he touched on that's the most salient to me is in other languages, it's their people who speak different languages organize their brains and thoughts and ideas differently, which is really cool. It can lead to whole different patterns of thought, which in the end could lead to like different types of innovations. It can lead to all sorts of different things, which are really cool. So I think we're having different languages in the world. But what I would say is everyone in the world should have their own languages and also have to speak English.
Can I respond to the phones being classist thing? I think that having phones being able to translate, having access to these phones would be part of the technological advancement. So right now, yeah, people lower class in a lot of cases don't have access to these phones, but I wish they did.
We getting Biden phones now, boys. We getting Biden phones. No more Obama phones.
Let's go with Joe.
All right, let's see what else we have here from the John. For Miyo, have there ever been places in the U.S. where whites have gone from a majority to a minority? If so, did we see non-white on white violence increase in this place?
Yeah, no, that's happening in the inner cities right now. In fact, there's like videos all up on social media, which of course isn't reminiscent of a larger growing pattern. Am I right, Tom? But it's just that it does exist. You can see videos of like classrooms full of non-white kids that are like bullying the fuck out of the like, well, you know, one or two white kids in the classroom. They're getting like beat half to death and whatnot, and they're yelling racial slurs at them. You see, you know, videos of little white kids surrounded by non-white kids who are beating on them. You see, like in areas where it's majority non-white demographics nowadays, where it's not safe to walk down the street as a white person more than any. You know, it's like there's, you know, the place where it's like in Minneapolis. There's parts of Minneapolis where it's not safe to walk it down the street at night, especially as a young girl, even more so as a young white girl. There was during the George Floyd riots, they were yelling, "Kill all the hey!" They're beating all the white people. Hey, they're gonna kill all the white people. It's like they were spray painting it on the statues and stuff like that.
Did you end up watching the rest of that BitChute?
No, I didn't watch that. I've got to. Oh man.
So I think another cool video that we should watch, because yeah, of course a lot of those are anecdotal. So we can talk about anecdotes on the other end. So there's a really cool Vice documentary I watched today that was like 25 minutes long. I'll send you guys the link in the private chat. It's fantastic, really. And it's about a white kid who actually, he was the only white kid in his elementary school. He eventually went to a more upper class white, mostly white high school or whatever, but then he then went on to go to a historically black college where he's one of maybe three white people. And not only has he been treated with welcoming arms, but he became the president of one of the most famous blocks of the college. Not because he like came in and like ruled over all the black people or whatever, but because he came in and he saw them as what they are, his fellow human beings, and he had the same dream as them, which was to better himself in the context of this environment and to recognize why we have something called a historically black college, why that is even a thing. But this guy, he describes his experience, how like 99% of interactions, people are insanely nice to him. And sometimes people are kind of suspicious of him. And he actually understands that because he looks at the history and he understands why someone might feel uncomfortable with a white kid at what we would call a historically black college.
White guilt is strong with that one. Oh, they discriminate against me, but I deserve it.
They're not discriminating against him. He became president of like an entire living area. Like, what, I don't know. That's not.
In our video, they make a white girl get on her knees and apologize for systemic or something.
Okay, I'm gonna be against making people get on their knees and apologize.
Get on your knees and apologize for your white privilege. That's what it was.
Oh no, you're gonna have to get on your knees too, Coder. It's gonna be all of us. Nobody's exempt.
She did it.
Everyone on the panel except Todd. Well, and me, because I'm gonna go out with a bang. But well, not a literal bang. I disavow. Didn't mean that. I meant a metaphor.
Nick Fuentes thing. Nick Fuentes almost committing a crime. He like describes something super illegal, and then he's like, but don't do that. But don't do that. See, Miyo knows what I'm talking about.
Yeah. No, one of these days, like when we haven't done like a nearly 5-hour stream, we'll watch that, and everybody needs to see it because it is, it's intense. Like we watched some of it, but then I wasn't sure because they have a lot of clips of, you know, they get a little bit violent. I don't know if that's okay on YouTube or if they're gonna do anything with that.
We could like download and like clip the worst parts out and like put an edit together of just. You know,
yeah, I mean,
maybe
if you had watched it one time, then you would know if it was okay. But he didn't even watch it. Doesn't do anything. So that's cool.
Yeah, I just got a message from Low End Theory. He wants to join in a little bit. Is that okay?
I mean, we're about to hit like 5 hours, like. So I don't.
And I was on Tom's
I told him he'd come on Saturday though.
Yeah. Why don't you pop on Saturday night? And I was on Tom's stream at like 5 a.m. this morning, right, Tom?
Mm-hmm.
And he went to sleep. And yeah, I popped on because General Milley committed treason, and Tom was trying to defend it, and it's worse than we even think. So yeah, but only for a couple of minutes. I didn't want to be bad faith or anything. We're gonna do all the research.
I thought you moved away from whether or not he committed treason. You said we want to wait to see.
No. He contacted them on October 30th. Now before the election, it's verified treason now. So again,
I don't
we'll
want to
that
get too
letter
far into this, but
declassified.
do we know what he
Exactly.
said when he contacted them?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, it's bad.
Okay.
So you should probably reverse what you said earlier. But
I
again,
didn't say
we won't
anything.
get into that. You kind of sided with him.
I didn't take a stance. I said I don't know.
Thank you for the $20 super chat. And he said, there is a story where a African football player shot a white family and a white HVAC worker. What does HVAC stand for?
It's heat, ventilation,
back.
air conditioning.
Worker in a house where blacks also were present. The excuse by the anti-white media was, oh, he just got hit in the head playing football. Okay.
Was he charged? Like, did he? I assume he was convicted for murder. I don't know what that question's
Yeah, I
supposed to
don't
be
know
about.
that story. I don't know how that turned out or played out. But it's just like, you see the that video of like all those black kids like kidnapped a young autistic white kid and like beat him half to death and like shoved his head in a toilet and were like burning him or something like that, like basically tortured this poor kid. And it's like they did get charged in the end, but the media, like you had Don Lemon on CNN saying, and they were yelling anti-white like racist slurs at the kid the whole time. And it's like you have Don Lemon on CNN the next day saying, I don't think it was a hate crime. Like, they make excuses for these people, and it's like it's all pervasive throughout the media. It's okay when people treat white people like that, and it's enforcing the culture, even though the courts held up in the end, which is good. So at least there's that.
Yeah, Don Lemon's an idiot.
Coma said that it would get taken down. I mean, but like I feel like I've seen clips of it's like kind of like rioting, and they're like news clips too. So I don't know. Maybe like
what was the question about TOS?
Yeah, like because like I when I played the video, it's a 30-minute video, and I played like the anti-white rhetoric, but the second half of it's showing like kind of the effects of it. So there's a lot of rioting. They're going after white people.
I'll download it and edit it to only be like the parts that would be non-violent.
Did the video get taken down?
No, I just haven't played the violent part because I'm not sure if it was going to be okay for.
Is it on YouTube?
No, it's on
BitChute.
Remember, it was mostly peaceful.
Probably on BitChute for a reason.
I have a video about Kyle Rittenhouse where I show like actual dead people with blood dripping out of their skulls and stuff like that. And YouTube took it down, but when I challenged it, they put it back up with like a warning at the beginning. Yeah. And so normally that's what they'll do is they'll take it down, and if you challenge it, they'll put it back with a warning.
Because it's like news clips and stuff. Like it's just a compilation. The main thing that they do is they just have like some scary music in the background, so it makes it seem a lot more dramatic. But yeah, I feel like it should be okay, but I also don't want to chance it.
I'll watch it.
Thank you. So let me see if we have any other questions.
It's Ali in the chat said that the black kid, I think she's talking about the black kids Mia was talking about, they got convicted of hate crimes.
Where's Ali? I don't see her in chat. Show yourself, Ali.
It was like if you scroll
I see it.
Yeah, right. That's what I said. Is all those kids who did that? They kidnapped the white kid or whatever. The courts held up in the end, and they did get convicted of hate crimes. But you have the media pushing all of this, saying it's not a hate crime. You should give these kids an excuse because historical oppression or whatever. And it's just like they're enforcing this sort of rhetoric, this sort of culture. They're making it seem like these things are acceptable. But of course, our legal institutions are still holding up, which is at least there's that still for now.
No, Coma, we haven't watched Farmland. That's the Lauren Southern one, right?
Yeah, that's Lauren Southern.
Yeah, I'll watch it.
Maybe me and Todd will watch it live or something.
It's an interesting. I think that would be really good for you to see, Brittany. Honestly, because it tells you like exactly the result of what's happening in South Africa.
An hour and 20 minutes.
Sort of the history.
I encourage you to seek other historic sources for the history of South Africa other than Lauren Southern. Also,
yes, I encourage you.
about
I
it,
encourage
please.
you to never, ever just take Lauren Southern's word for anything.
Lauren
But,
Southern will be
agreed.
here on
Hey, Mio, we agree on that.
Yeah, it's just that the interviews with people who are in South Africa who describe their situations, their family situations, their anecdotes, one could say.
I believe there was one
interesting
person from that documentary. There was like one family they interviewed that like later came out and said that like what they said was taken out of context and they were like really unhappy about it.
Really,
that might be something to
knowing
keep an
Lauren
eye out for.
Southern, I wouldn't be
Yeah.
totally surprised. But I will look into that, see if there's.
You've seen it, right, Emil?
Yeah, I have. I found it interesting. Thought there was a lot of like e-girl shit in there. Like, half the scenes are just her dressing up in like safari outfits, like in front of the camera with voiceover. But
Sounds about right.
Okay. Let me see if there's anything else we need before we probably shut this down. I think we're probably good. So, I mean, I guess can we keep Coder and Mio? I think Tom, if you want to just have any final, I'll give you guys 2 minutes each, and then we will go. So, Tom, who's gonna go last? Did you say?
I would like to.
All right, I'll go first. How about that?
Okay.
So, let's see. Let me collect my thoughts. Well, I had fun tonight, as always. It's good to be back. It's good to be back with Coder, my best buddy. Maybe besides Tom. It's hard to pick between the two.
I'm getting jealous,
they're
buddy.
both. Yeah, we're all just such good friends. We're so close, and we share so many ideas, really. So anyway, it's I thought this was for the majority of it a good conversation. I mean, it's like it was. I got a new perspective on some of these things from Coder that I haven't got from a lot of other people. And the same with Tom too. In the end, it's good to hear people that I understand the heart and intention behind the world that Coder wants, and I don't think that what he wants is an inherently bad thing. And so that's more than I can say for a lot of people on the left. I think that there's a lot of people on the left that what they want for people like me is really bad. Like they hate me. They hate people who have the ideas I have. They hate people who have the shared ancestral history as mine. And they think that we deserve whatever's coming to us in the end because of it. I think that Coder wants to build towards a better world where everyone is better off, and that people who are unfairly they got a bad shake out of everything. He wants to make it so that that's corrected and that that's no longer the case. So it's like I don't think he's a bad guy. I disagree with some of his ideas, and I think that more conversations ensuing in the future might we might come to terms on some things. But overall, I learned a lot, and I hope the audience learned a lot, and I hope everybody had fun.
Cool. All right, Tom.
Yeah, I appreciate you guys bringing me on. I was happy
We dropped
to
60
be here.
people on Twitch for you. Oh wait, I gotta show you guys what I dropped them into. Let me show everybody really quick.
Oh no, dude. I really hope Prime. I really hope Prime does not group me into this. Like if he's mad at me now because he did this, like
First of all, our Twitch crowd is very liberal, so like they were actually giving me a hard time about the conversation that was being had. When I got into there and I saw what this panel was, and I just dropped them up on. But this is where. It's the panel that I dropped our.
The all black everything panel that
this is the world
happens
that
every
Tom
Thursday.
wants.
Hey, they had an all white everything panel as well. So.
Okay.
The Prime Kai's. So he's a cool dude. I like him. So
yeah,
okay.
Prime's good peoples.
No, but so
Is that why they tried to call him a sex predator?
I mean,
when I went in there, one of the people in chat, because I was asking to see if it worked, and that's when I saw what they were doing. They're like, "Oh, how's your blacks are inferior conversation going?" I'm like, "Oh god, this is not good. This is not good at all." All right, sorry. 2 minutes. Go ahead, Tom.
So yeah, I guess like I wasn't really part of the little Timmy conversation, but overall, like there isn't a large amount of hate against white people. There is a small minority of a minority of a minority where like these people are very hateful and they're very loud and obnoxious, and most people can't stand them, and most people talk about how dumb they are. Even leftists and progressives and socialists, they all talk about how much they can't stand people who talk about Mayo-cide and you know, getting rid of the white people or white people becoming a minority. Like they talk a lot about how obnoxious this stuff is and how much they don't appreciate that sort of rhetoric. It's not something that's big and scary that we should all be afraid of. It is a small amount of people that we uberly focus on, just like leftists uberly focus on some like racist on the internet and talk about how it's taking over America and now Trump is the next Adolf Hitler, right? Like
and
you
they're
guys
totally right. And the next Trump's
I'm
gonna
in
be
my
worse.
I'm in my closing statement. Sir.
Uninterrupted.
Uninterrupted.
So it's the same as that. You guys who are doing this are the same as them. You are the same as the people who were freaking out about Trump. You're the same as the people who freak out about Nazis everywhere. You're the same as the people who think that like everybody's a fascist or everybody's a racist. Like you guys who are the people who are black and call everybody racist and think that every little thing that happens or is said to them is racist. You guys are doing the same thing where you read everything is racist and everything is against you and everybody hates you and it's so hard for you. You guys are the same people. You're doing the same exact things. I can't stand any of it. As far as the conversation that we had here, as I said, when it comes to logic, and you guys really should, if you guys are going to watch debates and like participate in these sorts of things, you should really learn logic. Their conclusions were part of our premises. Like we included their conclusions. We didn't have to say that they were wrong in order for us to be right. We didn't have to say that. It's not that we're saying that they're correct. It's that we're saying it doesn't matter whether or not they're correct. It's irrelevant because in the end, we can still prove that what we're saying is correct and you cannot prove that what you're saying is correct. But even if it was, ours would still be correct in the end. And so, like, go through some logic, check this stuff out, and you will see that, like, literally, no matter what, everybody here could be correct, and in the end, it would be our conclusions that, in the end, were, the superior conclusions.
All right, Coder, you are up.
Right on. So first off, big fan of facts and logic. Love it. Again, my degree was computer science, so basically, and minored in math. So logic is literally my whole game. But I just want to, I'm going to kind of reiterate some of the things from my opening statement, and hopefully we've brought some of these back full circle. So like I said at the beginning, I'm not here to tell you there's no way that white people will become a minority in this country, meaning they are less than 50% of the population. I think this very likely will happen. I don't think this is necessarily a bad thing. I think in some ways it could be a bad thing, which is why I am not saying that there is nothing that feels like anti-white rhetoric. Tom acknowledged that a lot of this comes from very loud and vocal minorities, not literally like, when we say minority there, we're not talking about as we were earlier, but anyway, even if we cut off immigration, the demographic impact could still happen. So we basically are at a situation where we have to figure out how we're going to talk about these things. And when we look at how ideas around the history of race and racism are presented in a classroom, I can't imagine a world where things are better if we remove the context and the realities that things like critical race theory give us, the new dimensions to these things that these topics give us, because this is how we actually defeat these things. This is how we teach people the way that race was constructed so that we never see it constructed again. Hang on, I actually have a little bit more. I wanted to come back to that quote I said at the beginning from Gloria Ladson-Billings, who said, "Some things are hard and we are better off having conversations about hard things." I think these conversations are difficult. I think a lot of people say really dumb things sometimes. I think I say dumb things sometimes. And like, especially in a situation where we're going to have mostly white women across the country teaching the history of race and racism, there are going to be a lot of clumsy situations. It's going to be difficult. It's going to be hard, but we have to be ready to take these things on, because otherwise we're going to fucking kill each other. And I don't know why we would want to instill more animosity between us rather than trying to seek this understanding of what's actually happened. So things to keep in mind, questions to ask yourself if you're at home and you're wondering how you can get a better understanding of all these things. Ask yourself, what is racism? What is race? Where do these come from? How have they manifested? How do they manifest differently in different contexts, and why? Why is whiteness differentiated from blackness? Why are mixed race people who are half white not considered white? These are very interesting questions that we explored a little bit here. We could do entire debates about any one of these. But really, I think learning is radical. That's why I call myself Radical Coder, and I love to learn. That's what I'm here to do. If you want to argue with me about it, find me online. Thanks for having me, Politically Provoked, and thank you both, Miyo and Tom, for being here.
All right.
Last thing, share, plug your streams, smash the subscribe button, hit the bell, smash the button. Man, I said it wrong. Don't forget that Tom is my best friend, and we have so much in common.
So much. And these are two race realists, self-admitted race realists tonight. So
okay, so if you're going to throw that out there, we are people who recognize that race, the perception of race has a real impact. Perception of race has a real impact. Okay, come on.
Once it's on the internet, buddy.
Radical Coder on Twitch, Tom Foolery Show on YouTube,
That's right.
And Politically Provoked, only place you find Miyo. Smash the button. Man, I can't do it tonight.
Yeah,
It's
make
okay.
sure you guys hit the thumbs up
Right.
button on this
Right.
video. It really helps get them into the algorithm
Yeah.
too. So make sure you hit those thumbs upsies.
Thanks, Tom. Okay, so what I was going to say is tomorrow we have a really long day. We're starting at 4 p.m. Eastern. We have 3 back-to-back debates, a healthcare debate, a systemic racism debate, and then we've got an infrared debate. They planned this like a month ago, and they have like some crazy Twitter beef going on. So that should be interesting. We will be having another host with us for some of these, especially during the infrared debate, so we can kind of have a little bit, balanced with blood sports and actually a debate. But Saturday we have our Pop On Drink and Chat. We also have a debate right before the Pop On Drink and Chat. Fascism debate, so we'll be busy Saturday, and then Sunday is going to be the Lauren Southern and Lauren Witzke debate. They will be debating with Avi and Mouthy Infidel on transgenderism, and if it's like a mental illness or something, I don't know. I'm tired. So yeah, we will see you guys tomorrow at 4 p.m. Eastern, and that is all she wrote. Oh yeah, and Tom and Coder are going to be there for our watch party. You guys are going to see that anti-white rhetoric, and you're going to maybe think twice on wanting to become a minority.
We don't deny that anti-white rhetoric exists. We deny that it's a big problem.
It is a big problem.
Yeah,
All
that's
right.
not what you'd be demonstrating by showing us a YouTube video where people say anti-white rhetoric. We don't deny that those exist.
And stuff I can't show on YouTube, apparently. So, joke's on you, man. All right. Good night, guys.
Don't go to Washington this weekend. It's a trap.
It's a trap.
All right.
What's happening in Washington?
Yeah,
The
what's
Feds
happening?
Another bullshit protest, but it's
Yeah,
all
feds
bullshit.
are planning
Total,
a rally.
Yeah,
Totally fed up.
Total setup.
Yeah.
Nobody I know.
For Trump?
Nobody,
1,000%.
yeah, but nobody I know, and I know a few communities. It's like we knew people that went to January 6th. Like nobody's going to this thing except like feds. It's total.
It's
fucking
100%. The people pushing it are fucking like Fed activists.
It's not even the RNC. Like nobody. It's no group that I've ever even heard of.
I didn't even hear that there
I'm
was
in the
anything going on.
every circle I'm in a part of is like nobody's going to this. The feds are doing
Nobody's
it.
going.
So,
It's so
I just
weird.
want to have said that before it happens. It's a good thing you reminded me, Tom.
And,
Like,
and I think like people would be probably hesitant to go something like that just in general. What happened on January 6th and people getting in a lot of trouble for that.
Well,
Why
yeah,
would Trump
the
even
real
do
people
that?
are.
Dude? That's so dumb.
He's not doing it. He's not doing it.
That's what
That's
I
what
asked.
we're saying.
I said Trump's holding a rally, and you said, yeah.
No, it's not. It's not
No.
Trump. It's just like it's out there in the consciousness. Like, oh, is everyone that remember that rally we're going to? Hello, fellow patriots that are definitely not. I'm not a Fed. That, but remember how we're all doing this rally and we're gonna take back the government and blah blah blah. It's like they're trying to push that on us so bad so that they can have another 1/6 and they can arrest a bunch of people and they can talk about how the insurrection of anti-vaxxers and Trump supporters and white people is like needs a whole new crackdown where they can take all our damn guns away or some shit. You'll see.
Okay. All right. Well, I gotta head out. Appreciate it, guys.
All right.
Big
Yeah, I
easy,
gotta
bro.
bounce out too. But hey, good